Chapter 91. Master. Zhu Yao was startled and was instantly dumbfounded. She had waited for 10 days for the result. Yet, she never expected that the result would be his ascension. Holy shit, this was definitely a godly development. I'm fine now. I don't care who brought me to this world. What does he want? I don't need Master to help me investigate. Stupid. Yu Yan shook his head, however. His expression was unexpectedly gentle. He stroked her head. I have already been in this world for nearly 20,000 years. Even if I don't ascend, I will still have to reincarnate, and similarly, I will have to leave this world. The hell? She had forgotten that even cultivators had a lifespan. Master's lifespan was almost up? For the first time, she despised her master's age. It was not easy for him to be enlightened, but they had to face separation again. This was worse than lovers becoming brothers. It was just a little bit worse. When will Master ascend? Tomorrow. Zhu Yao lowered her head. It was no wonder he had been disappearing from time to time in recent days. So he was preparing for his ascension. Also, the sudden appearance of so many formations in Jade Forest Mountain was probably a preparation for the ascension as well. All right. Zhu Yao gritted her teeth and finally managed to suppress the sourness that was constantly surging out from the depths of her heart. Taking a deep breath, she took a step forward, hugged onto his head, and fiercely bit down on his mouth. Don't worry. I will come and look for you soon. Just wait in the sky. Again, if you dare to mess around behind my back, I'll castrate you later. Yu Yan did not speak, and simply slowly smiled. This was the first time Zhu Yao truly saw his smile. That smile was indescribable. She simply felt that even the most beautiful things in this world could not compare to his current expression. It made her want to kiss him hard and hide the smile that belonged only to her. On the day of Yu Yan's ascension, Zhu Yao had been watching the entire process from the top of Jade Forest Mountain. On that day, the entire sky of the cultivation world was covered by layers of tribulation thunder. 9 heavenly thunder of ascension, bolts of lightning bolts that were thicker than the entire Jade Forest Mountain, struck straight towards her master. It lit up the whole sky. She stood not far away and stared blankly at the man in the middle, who had been standing upright the whole time. He seemed to be enduring the tribulation lightning, as if it didn't hurt him at all. He didn't even have a crease on his clothes. 81 bolts of lightning struck in a row. Colorful rays of light descended from the sky, and heavenly sounds that sounded like the sounds of nature came. It contained countless heavenly Tao. Hundreds of birds chirped and danced around the heavenly light. The figure that she was extremely familiar with slowly rose into the sky. His heart felt empty. He couldn't tell if it was a sense of loss or something else, until he lowered his head and anxiously called out, Zhu Yao, as though he had something to tell her. She was stunned. Only then did he fly towards the 5-colored light and stop a step away from him. Master. Yu Yan reached out a hand, circled around her back, and gently pulled. She fell into his arms, close to his heart. On the day of her master's ascension, he instructed her to do 2 things. The first item, I'll be waiting for you in the sky. Why do I feel that something is wrong? The second one, don't die randomly anymore. I still feel that something is wrong. After telling her about these 2 things, her master also did something shameful. With lightning speed, he kissed her, and then flew away, as if he was escaping from a crime scene. Zhu Yao rubbed her teeth that were forcefully kissed by him. She was speechless. Master, if you don't know how to kiss, you should have said so earlier. Come back. I can teach you. Anyways, the incident that day had caused a huge commotion. Because of the ascension event, almost all of the disciples of Ancient Hill sect came out to watch. They hoped that by borrowing someone else's ascension, they would be able to comprehend a strand of the heavenly Tao. Hence, the incident that day was witnessed by the entire sect. Although they might not have seen the lightning speed kiss, when her master called out to her before he left, everyone clearly heard it. Little martial ant. Sect Master ZMO was so shocked that his jaw was about to fall off. He stared blankly at the person floating in the sky, though the little girl behind him happily stretched out her head, and her smile was especially bright. Master. Amen. Zhu Yao nodded coldly. She knew that most probably, The entire sect was filled with gossipy thoughts. However, she did not want to explain her love history to others. Hence, she brought out her master's most commonly used official expression, cold and aloof. "Little martial ant, why are you back?" Zmo could not help but say that he was dumbfounded. Didn't this little martial ant of his fall 200 years ago? But why was she standing right in front of him, perfectly fine? And he could not even see through her cultivation level. This was definitely illogical. "I encountered some matters." Zhu Yao basically did not plan to explain. She glanced at the little bun behind him. "Send my disciple up Jade Forest Mountain a month later." After saying that, without waiting for his reaction, she flew back to Jade Forest Mountain and sealed the formation while she was at it. That's right, big sis is just that cold and aloof. Before her master left, he gave her his storage ring, which meant that she had inherited all of his assets. When she was arranging his belongings, When she was arranging his assets, Zhu Yao stared at the bag filled with mystic tools and mystic treasures, as well as mystic arts, refining materials and whatnot, and felt a slight headache. The hell, there was everything here. But why wasn't there even a single spirit stone? Shouldn't that be the common currency in the cultivation world? Her master was actually so poor that he did not even have a single piece. Zhu Yao felt a little stifled in her heart. Could it be that she had to first sell off these mystic tools to spend money in the future? After confirming that she did not have a single spirit stone, Zhu Yao sighed deeply and took out a set of mystic arts. This was the 5 thunder arts that her master had instructed her to quickly familiarize herself with. Her cultivation level was rising very quickly, but her mystic arts did not improve by much. The reason why her master wanted her to take in a disciple a month later was so that she could use this period of time to quickly familiarize herself with the mystic arts and stabilize her realm. Although she did not know if there would be any conflicts between her current body and human practitioner's mystic arts. After all, she was a dragon. However, there was nothing wrong with using the mystic arts that she had learned before. It seemed like the methods of cultivation were all interlinked. Zhu Yao decided to go into closed-door training at the cold lake for a month. Only when she was about to enter, when she saw her reflection in the water, did Zhu Yao understand why Zmo called her little martial ant with such certainty. Mama's egg, her human form, looked exactly the same as her original body when she had just crossed over. Zhu Yao harbored a little thoughts. After all, this was her original body. Sesame said that when demonic beasts transform, they would transform into the most perfect human form. However, she had never felt that she was perfect. At the very least, her breasts were not perfect. Zhu Yao silently felt a little sad. Fortunately, she knew the art of transfiguration. At the very most, she could just change her appearance for fun. A month's time passed in the blink of an eye, but it was enough for her to familiarize herself with all of the lightning-type mystic arts. Other than the various mystic arts in the storage ring, there were 2 other jade pieces that caught her attention. One was a jade piece that was related to refining artifacts. She probed it with her divine sense, and realized that other than refining artifacts, there were also some of her master's own insights. And the other was a 5 elements formation. Inside, there were detailed records of the layout and control methods of various formations. Her master specialized in refining artifacts and formations, and he especially had a deep understanding of formations. In the cultivation world, no one's formations could be stronger than her master's. Even the Great Mountain Barrier formation of Ancient Hill Sect was set up by her master. Zhu Yao pondered for a moment and decided to first learn about formations. Her master had once taught her a few simple formations, but after all, she was the successor of Jade Forest Mountain. If her formations were too weak, wouldn't she throw her master's face? She had to make up for this aspect. Just as she was about to take out that mystic art jade tablet, she suddenly realized a white object was placed at the corner of the storage ring, and it looked a little familiar. Zhu Yao took it out to take a look, and realized that it was a jade pendant. And it was the exact same jade pendant that her master hid in during the Taesioluk incident. It looked a little like it was left behind. However, this jade pendant did not have her master's divine sense. Zhu Yao touched it a little reminiscently. After pondering for a moment, she decided to wear it and treat it as a memento. When Zhu Yao walked out of the cold pond, she sensed someone approaching. They seemed to be disciples from the Sword Mountain. She moved her divine sense and undid the Jade Forest Mountain's formation. Not even a moment later, a disciple dressed in the sect's uniform arrived at the mountain peak. This disciple greets Ancestral Grand Master. What's the matter? The sect master has sent this disciple to invite Ancestral Grand Master to the Great Hall to participate in the Spirit Veins test. The disciple said. Only then did Zhu Yao recall that any child born in the cultivation world would have their spirit veins tested for the first time at the age of 5. Bao Bao was Zimo's daughter, so naturally, he placed a lot of importance on her. Logically speaking, Zmo possessed duo spirit veins, and the sect master's wife possessed duo spirit veins as well. The spirit veins of the children they gave birth to would not be bad either. The only thing to blame was that Jade Forest Mountain was too famous, and had always taken in disciples with lightning spirit veins. For someone to be taken in as a disciple without even having his spirit veins tested, it could not help but make people feel dissatisfied. Now that he had intentionally organized such a ceremony, it was to support his own daughter. Zhu Yao could completely understand. Hence, she followed that disciple to the Great Hall of the main mountain. When she arrived, there were already many people in the Great Hall. Not only were there the mountain lords of the various mountains, the nascent soul elders of the various sects and clans, even the 3 sovereigns were present. Feng Yi was seated at the seat of honor, and had once again returned to her usual appearance of a tall mountain flower. However, her pair of eyes no longer carried the arrogance she had in the past. Instead, they looked lifeless. Recalling what happened before, Zhu Yao still felt a little awkward. She tried her best to put on an ice-cold expression and walked in. Without any hesitation, she sat right at the center. The people of Jade Forest Mountain were just that cool. After all, she was the main character of taking in disciples today. Other than Feng Yi, the other 2 sovereigns turned to look at her a little strangely. Others might not be able to see it, but the 3 of them could clearly see it. This little junior martial sister who had disappeared and reappeared again actually had a cultivation level of a demigod. A demigod in 200 years. What kind of joke was this? The 2 of them faintly suppressed their own astonishment. Were all the practitioners of Jade Forest Mountain this monstrous? The 2 of them silently looked at each other, and then tacitly looked at Zmo, recalling the main character of today's Spirit Veins test. They wondered if he would raise another little monstrous. Zmo first courteously said a few words. Seeing that everyone had arrived, he gave a few instructions, and then had someone bring his daughter out. Bao Bao's original name was Xia Lui. That's right, the sect master's surname was Xia and not Zi. Zmo was merely his Taoist name. Xia Lui was brought out by the sect master's wife. Initially, she was obediently being held by her hand, but when she saw Zhu Yao, she instantly became excited and sweetly called out, "Master!" If not because she was being pulled by the sect master's wife, the little radish head would have already charged over. Amen. Zhu Yao lightly responded, as a form of response, and continued to act cold and aloof. Chapter 92. Zmo waved his hand, and a crystal ball floated in the air. It was the ball used to test spirit veins. "Baby, come put your hand on it," Zmo said to his daughter with a smile. Although a child's spirit vein could be seen at the age of 1, if the child was too young, the test sphere that was filled with spiritual energy would instead be disadvantageous to the child. Usually, the child would only be tested at the age of 5. Therefore, he didn't know what kind of spiritual root his daughter had. However, he was very confident. For a moment, the whole place quietened down, and all eyes turned to the little girl in the middle. Probably because it was her first time facing so many people, the little girl was a little nervous. She glanced at her parents, and then weakly turned her head to look at Zhu Yao. Only when she saw Zhu Yao nodding her head, did she finally feel at ease, and pressed her little paws onto the ground. All eyes were fixed on the ball. Starting from the child's palm, a little blue light seeped out and slowly spread into the ball. In a short while, it had already occupied half of the sphere. Good. Zmo silently praised in the depths of his heart. Usually, the purer a spirit vein was, the larger the area the color occupied in the sphere. Occupying half of the sphere was already considered a very good spirit vein. As long as another type of spirit root appeared, even if it was a tri-spirit root, his cultivation would still be greatly improved. However, as everyone held their breaths and waited, the blue color spread to the entire surface of the crystal ball bit by bit until it covered the entire ball, turning the crystal ball into a blue ball. Zemo's heart, which was still cheering earlier, instantly fell to the bottom of the valley. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. No, this is impossible. Zemo's expression instantly turned as pale as snow. Pulling his daughter's hand, he waited for the color in the crystal to disappear. He pressed on it again, but the result was the same as before. There was only a single blue color. A single color represented a single spirit root, and blue was, oh my God, it's a water heaven spiritual root. This is the purine body. Purine body, isn't that a cauldron? And it's the best. All sorts of discussions could be heard from the scene. The people from their own sect looked at the little girl in the middle with pity, but the people from other sects who were invited to participate had no qualms at all. He began to size up the child who wasn't even 5 years old. His eyes were filled with undisguised lust and greed. Zemo's face was already pale to the point where not a single strand of blood could be seen, and he looked as though he was unable to react to such a huge blow. The child, who was being held tightly by him, also began to panic. Children were the most sensitive, and coupled with the malicious gazes around, she was even more afraid. She wanted to hide, but she was still caught by her father. Her eyes were already misty. Sect Master Zemo, this humble one has a son as well. He has just built his foundation, and he's rather compatible with your esteemed daughter. Finally, a nascent soul cultivator couldn't help but speak up. He was the sect master of Lingxiao sect, and he thought that the sect master was very compatible with the sect master's children. That was a purine body that could only be found once every few 100,000 years, an excellent cauldron. No matter how bad one's spirit root was, they would still be able to reach the nascent soul stage. His words seemed to have broken the awkwardness of the audience. The nascent soul elders, sect leaders, and legacy disciples of the various sects also asked for her hand in marriage. Zemo was so furious that he nearly puked out blood. However, there was nothing he could do. The daughter he had longed for so many years. It was a water-type heaven spiritual root. An elemental mystic art could not even protect herself, which meant that she was destined to be a cauldron for the rest of her life. But that was his daughter, the pearl in his palm. How could he bear to part with her? Little Radish was already frightened by this scene. As though she had faintly understood the current situation, she bit her lips, and tears began to drip down. The others were still arguing over the matter of who would be the one to perform the dual cultivation with the child. Zhu Yao frowned, and the pressure from her entire body was instantly released. Everyone present, other than the 3 sovereigns, as well as Zemo and Little Radish whom she had intentionally avoided, fell onto the ground with a thud. There were even a few Azal stage disciples who had already puked out blood. For a moment, the great hall was strangely silent. Zhu Yao walked down from the seat of honor. She did not intentionally avoid the people lying on the ground, and simply imbued her feet with a wind-type mystic art. Hence, with every step she took, it was as though she was sweeping the floor, sweeping the people who were blocking her path to the 2 sides. She walked straight in front of Zemo, and lowered her head to look at the little Radish, who still had tears in her eyes. With a cold voice she said, "Kneel, and acknowledge me as your master, little martial ant." Zemo instantly widened his eyes. Before he could even be shocked that she was actually a demigod stage practitioner, he was already moved by her light words. His pair of old eyes could not help but tear up. However, Zhu Yao did not even give him a glance. She continued to stare at Little Radish, and once again said, "Kneel." Zemo seemed to have only just regained his senses, as he hurriedly pulled his daughter, and had her perform the ritual of acknowledging him as her master. Little Radish's tears had yet to dry, yet she understood the current situation a little. She heavily kowtowed to her 3 times, and was no longer as lively as before, as she looked at her with a hint of grievance. "Amen." Zhu Yao nodded, and signaled for her to stand up. Focusing her attention, She tapped on her little forehead, and a blood-colored cloud-like mark appeared on her forehead. The mark of a personal succeeding disciple. This time, Zmo really cried. He hurriedly wiped away his tears, and for the first time, he solemnly bowed to her with cupped fists. "Thank you, little martial ant." Zhu Yao coldly glanced at him, and still maintained her cold and aloof demeanor. "Don't be infatuated with Big Sis. Big Sis is just a legend." Turning around slightly, she once again strengthened her pressure, especially towards those nascent soul practitioners who had once proposed marriage to Zmo. Only when she saw the faint traces of blood at the corner of their lips did she finally stop. "She's this sovereign's disciple now. If you wish for a marriage, come look for me at Jade Forest Mountain." After saying that, she carried her own disciple and disappeared from the spot. "This lady here is just that domineering, cool and awesome. Come bite me then." Only then did the practitioners who were still lying on the ground finally regain their senses. That person earlier was actually a sovereign of Jade Forest Mountain. Heavens, that place that specialized in producing perverted practitioners. Didn't they say that Sovereign Yu Yen had already ascended a month ago? Why was there a demigod sovereign here? And that terrifying pressure earlier? Only then did the crowd begin to wipe off their cold sweat, as they regretted their suicidal actions earlier. Although the pure-in physique was very alluring, offending a demigod practitioner was still very terrifying, alright? Especially when that person was even from Jade Forest Mountain. The fame of Jade Forest Mountain was not simply because of the #1 practitioner in the cultivation world, Yu Yen, who had just ascended, but because of their terrifying strength. Almost every single successor of Jade Forest Mountain was someone who did not play by the rules, and they were especially famous for being protective. The reason why they dared to publicly propose marriage to Zmo was because they were certain that as a sect master, he would not do anything out of line. Adding that the majority of the people who proposed marriage were nascent soul practitioners like him. For the sake of the sect's reputation, he did not dare to openly oppose them. However, Jade Forest Mountain was different. That place was filled with perverts, and if they were unhappy, they would definitely annihilate your entire family. The nascent soul reverends who had opened their mouths to propose earlier could not help but panic in their hearts, as they hurriedly bid farewell and returned home. They hoped that person on Jade Forest Mountain would not remember them, and settle the score later. Zhu Yao brought the frightened little radish back to Jade Forest Mountain, and the moment they landed, she immediately began to bawl loudly. Zhu Yao had always been helpless towards little radishes, and could only pat on her head to console her. However, she was unable to stop little radish's sadness from flowing like a river. Just when she was at a loss, little radish stopped crying on her own. As she sniffled, she asked pitifully, "Master, what's a purine physique?" Zhu Yao was instantly caught by the question, and she was in a dilemma. How should she explain it? The explanation of this term was simply too inappropriate for children. "Is it very, very bad?" Little Radish raised her tear-filled face, and her eyes faintly looked as though they were about to overflow with tears again. "Not really," Zhu Yao hesitantly explained, as she stroked her little head. Little Radish fiercely pounced into her embrace, and her tone carried an extremely pitiful tone. "Then why doesn't everyone like Bao Bao? Bao Bao clearly didn't do anything wrong, right? Why doesn't everyone like Bao Bao?" Zhu Yao sighed. She did not know where to start explaining, and had no choice but to hug her a little tighter. "Don't worry, Master is here." She actually took in a disciple, so in the future, it would be her responsibility. She faintly had a premonition that the bug on her face might be related to her spirit vein. Or perhaps, it was because her pure-in physique was coveted by others, which caused her personality to become distorted, and then, thoughts of destroying the world were born in her mind. However, with her here this time, she definitely would not let her have the chance to go astray. When she thought of this, Zhu Yao pulled out the little person in her embrace, and seriously began to teach her. "Bao Bao no, I should call you Xiaolui. In the future, you will be the only disciple of my Jade Forest Mountain. Remember, Jade Forest Mountain will never accept a cowardly disciple. No matter how your spirit vein is, before you become strong, Master will be able to protect you. However, this definitely cannot become the reason for you to be weak, understand? Little Radish was startled, as she nodded her head as though she understood. After hesitating for a moment, she weakly asked, "Then, if I become strong, will everyone like me?" "I can't guarantee if everyone will like you or not," Zhu Yao said honestly. "However, I can guarantee that no one will dare to bully you." Little Radish frowned. She was still a little confused. However, there was no rush, she could slowly teach her. After telling her in detail about studying hard and improving every day, Zhu Yao then arranged for her to stay in the little straw cottage that she used to live in. Although she did have the urge to take out her master's few jeweled houses to show off, only adversity would spur people to grow, so she forcefully endured it. As for herself, naturally, she would be sleeping in her previous master's house. Zhu Yao looked at the familiar tables and chairs in the house, and sat on the only bed. The entire house was filled with her master's scent. This was not the first time she stayed in her master's room. When she was version 2.0, in order to take care of her more conveniently, her master had always slept together with her. However, only this time did she feel that the house was a little frighteningly cold. Chapter 93. Early in the morning of the second day, Zhu Yao went to look for ZMO, and understood the matters regarding the purine physique in detail. The so-called purine body referred to disciples with a single water spiritual root. Because the water spiritual root was gentle in nature, disciples with water spiritual roots had an innate ability to comprehend healing techniques. In game terms, she was a natural healer. However, in the immortal cultivation world, a healer was not a necessary talent for a team to raid a dungeon. This was because the water spirit root's method of healing mainly relied on injecting one's own spiritual power into the other party's body to repair the damage. This method was very fast, but it was very dangerous, because the 5 types of spirit roots were mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. If different types of spirit roots were to be injected into the other person's body, it would cause the original spirit chi to backfire, and the treatment might not be successful. In any case, it would be faster to die. This was also the reason why no one objected when ZMO sent her out to rescue Feng Yi back then. With the reason that her wood spirit vein was the same as Feng Yi's, no one objected to it, because the spiritual chi didn't conflict. However, the water spirit root was different. The water was gentle, and was the most stable of all the spirit chi. If the water spirit root was used to heal the spirit chi, not only would the spirit chi not backfire, it would also be absorbed by the spirit chi of the other party, and become his own spirit chi. This was the reason why the water spirit root was so popular. But it also had a drawback, because the spirit chi had to be absorbed by the individual. If he injected it into the other party's body, wouldn't he be gone? As a result, some people developed evil thoughts from the water spirit root, and forcefully intercourse with disciples with the water spirit root, so that they could absorb the spirit chi in the other party's body, and raise their own cultivation. And the person who was plucked was called a cultivation vessel. Most of the people with the water spirit root had multiple spirit roots. If it was not voluntary, they would more or less bring some other spirit chi with them when they plucked. Therefore, the better the quality of the water spirit root, the purer the spirit energy harvested would be. As for a single water spirit root, naturally, there was no need to say anything. However, a heaven spiritual root was hard to come by, especially a single water heaven spiritual root. Since ancient times, there were less than 100 people who had a single water spiritual root. Moreover, they would either die at the hands of the robbers, or be harvested to death. This was also the reason why ZMO was so flustered when he saw that his own daughter possessed a single water spirit vein. Of course, the reputation of a human cauldron was not good. It was despised by the monogamous righteous path. Only evil cultivators would raise a few human cauldrons. But who could resist the temptation of cultivation? Although the righteous path wouldn't openly raise her, they could still marry her. Moreover, it was easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against a stab in the dark. Who knew if the evil cultivators would strike in the dark? ZMO was actually a good person with a weak heart, ever since his disciple died 5 years ago. It could be seen from the fact that he mourned the other party on the anniversary of his death every year. Hence, currently, Zmo did not have any dreams of having his daughter's cultivation soar, nor did he have any dreams of ascending. He simply wished for her to have a smooth life, and even if she did not step onto the path of deities, it would still be better than being plucked. Thus, she asked little Martial Uncle not to teach her spells just like that. Are there no offensive arts for water element? Zhu asked. Zmo sighed. It's not that there aren't any. It's just that the water element is gentle. And this type of mystic art has never been strong. Even if I can control water, it won't be as powerful as other spells. Zhu Yao's expression sank as she glared at Zmo at the side. Being able to control water was not considered strong. You must be joking. Who gave you this idea? Call her out. I promise I won't beat her to death. Zhu Yao realized that Xia Lui was a very worry-free little radish. She faintly knew that her spirit vein wasn't very good, and after being secretly sad for a few days, she once again returned to that carefree little radish. Zhu Yao was a life cripple. In the past, when she did not have to avoid the valley, she did not have to worry about her master taking care of her. Now that she had a disciple, she had to do everything herself. However, she did not know how to cook, so she simply brought her disciple to visit Zmo every day. She would return after feeding her disciple. In any case, his daughter was his, so feeding her was everyone's responsibility, right? Regarding the matter of not teaching her any mystic arts, Zhu Yao did not agree, nor could she agree. Although as long as little radish did not have any cultivation, she would not be afraid of being plucked. It also meant that she would not have the ability to protect herself. Taking the initiative to attack was always better than passively taking a beating. Today was yet another day of free meals. Master. Little Radish ran over from afar, and in her hands, she seemed to be holding on to something. With an expectant look, she passed it to her. This is a spiritual fruit Daddy gave me. Here. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment, and her heart softened. Such a cute disciple. How could she not protect her? She really wanted to pinch her little cheeks. No. She had to remain calm. She was a cold and aloof demigod sovereign. Master doesn't need to eat. Little Radish paused. Her face was a little pale. She retracted her little hands a little disappointedly, but a moment later, she became spirited again. Then next time, this baby will bring Master something even more delicious. Zhu Yao stroked her head. What a considerate little cotton-padded jacket. Spreading out her arms, she said. Let's head back first. All right. Zhu Yao sweetly replied, however. She took a step back, and obediently followed behind her. Zhu Yao, who had spread out her arms. That what happened to pouncing into her embrace? Zhu Yao awkwardly retracted her hands. All right, she was a cold and aloof sovereign. Hugging a child was indeed a little damaging to her image. Turning around, she walked towards the teleportation formation of Jade Forest Mountain. In order to prevent her little disciple from being unable to catch up, she had even intentionally slowed down her footsteps, as she worriedly paced her steps. Little Radish was a good seedling. She had just taught her how to guide spiritual energy into her body 2 days ago, and now, she was already at the 2nd level of essence. Based on her calculations, she would be able to teach her a few simple mystic arts in a few days. I heard that Sect Master's daughter possesses the pure water spirit vein? Then isn't that the aptitude of a furnace? That's right. I never expected that after Sect Master had waited for so many years, in the end, it was all for naught. She actually gave birth to a daughter like this. I heard that all female practitioners with the pure water spirit vein have unique looks. I wonder how Sect Master's daughter looks like? Of course, she has a single pure water spirit vein. I wonder who she will be conducting a duo pair with in the future? That's right. In the future, her husband will be blessed with love. I just wonder if he will be able to hold on. Ha ha ha, that's right. Even I. Filthy words faintly sounded. Zhu Yao frowned, and she was a little furious in the depths of her heart. She never thought that there would be people in Ancient Hill Sect who would have such thoughts as well. Just as she was about to teach them a lesson, she lowered her head and saw that Little Radish was currently biting on her lower lips. She instantly changed her mind. A child at this age had already faintly developed a sense of right and wrong. Although she could not understand the hidden meaning behind the other party's words, she could still sense the other party's malicious words. Furthermore, she knew that her spirit vein was not very good right from the start. Are you angry? Zhu Yao did not speak. Instead, she immediately sent a voice transmission to Little Radish. Little Radish was startled as she raised her head to look at her. As expected, her large eyes were already faintly tearing up. She clenched her little fists and then nodded her little head. Do you remember the water control art that Master taught you? Zhu Yao continued. Little Radish nodded again. You can try it now. Little Radish's eyes shone. She turned to look at the two disciples who were currently conversing, and then looked at the pond at the side. She began to chant the incantation. She tried twice, but she did not succeed. Gritting her teeth, she chanted the incantation for the third time. Finally, the calm water began to ripple and slowly rose, forming a large lump of water. Little Radish held her breath as she controlled the water and moved it to the top of the two people who were chatting passionately. Her spiritual energy was finally exhausted as well. With a splash, the two of them were instantly drenched like two drowned chickens. Just as Little Radish was about to cheer, the two people who were drenched suddenly stood up. Who's the prank? Little Radish's face instantly paled. With a light wave of her sleeves, Zhu Yao concealed the two of them. The two of them searched for a long while, yet they could not find a single person. Only then did they admit their bad luck and walked far away while cursing. Zhu Yao brought Little Radish and flew all the way back to Jade Forest Mountain. Master, the way Little Radish looked at her had regained that sparkling expression, and the depths of her eyes were filled with the radiance of worship. Zhu Yao stroked her head and took the opportunity to educate her. Enduring silently is a good thing. If you endure too much, it's very easy for you to suffer internal injuries. So if there's anything, there's no need to hold it in. Whoever slaps your face, just ruthlessly slap them back, understand? Amen. Little Radish strongly nodded. Zhu Yao instantly felt mighty and domineering. But, Master, why do we have to hide? Little Radish asked. If we don't hide, are we going to wait to be caught? This is to keep a low profile. Others are already unable to defeat us, so we have to leave them some face. Understand? Understood. Little Radish nodded, as though she was receiving an imperial edict. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She couldn't have raised a little tyrant, right? Amen, that shouldn't be the case. She was so kind. 5 years later, Little Radish had already grown into a huge radish, and her cultivation had risen from the 2nd level of essence stage to the 8th level of essence stage. Among people of the same age, it was considered especially fast. Zhu Yao was very gratified, but ZMO was very worried. Whenever he had the chance, he would climb up to Jade Forest Mountain and sigh at her. Senior Martial Aunt, my baby. Luwei, oh no, it's you, Luo. It's best if she doesn't rise so quickly. That's right, she gave Little Radish a Taoist name, Yu Luo. Bo. After all, she was a disciple of Jade Forest Mountain, so naturally, her surname had to be Yu. Speaking of this matter, she had to mention that back then, when she gave her disciple a Taoist name, she had initially intended for it to be a D character. On Jade Forest Mountain, there were only the two of them, master and disciple. Unfortunately, it was vetoed by ZMO. He stubbornly stuck to Jade Forest Mountain to protest, and loudly roared, Senior Martial Aunt, if you dare to name my daughter Jade Emperor, I will dare to jump down from Jade Forest Mountain. In order to reconcile the internal conflict in the sect, Zhu Yao had no choice but to painfully give up on this name. In the end, she decided on the Luo character. Zhu Yao believed that the name she gave her was much more famous than her master's, and it was all because he had a father with low taste. Senior Martial Aunt, you have taught me well, but isn't it a little too tiring? Why don't you rest for a short period of time? Senior Martial Aunt, I heard that there's a little problem with the formations over at Moon Alliance sect. You've studied formations for so many years. Why don't you give them some pointers? Senior Martial Aunt. In any case, recently, ZMO had been thinking of ways to make his own daughter not so eye-catching. Of course, he was ignored by Zhu Yao. In any case, her master often ignored people like this as well, so ZMO should already be used to it. Chapter 94. ZMO was used to it, but he could no longer remain calm. His daughter was already eye-catching enough, but her cultivation was rising so quickly. Wasn't it obvious that she was being coveted? Master, I'm back. Just as she said that, little Radish, who was already at the height of her chest, had already hopped back. Compared to her soft and adorable look in the past, the current Yuluo had already completely changed. She was even more daring, passionate, and lively. Too much. Yuluo replied excitedly. Master, I went to Weapon Peak today and saw Xiao Yuan. Then I gave him a good beating. Zemo's heart shook. What? Xiao Yuan? Isn't that junior brother Zi Yuan's treasured nephew? Although junior brother Zi Yuan didn't have a dual cultivation partner, he had a younger brother, who was at the Oris core stage. A few years ago, he had a son who was only 6 years old, and was extremely precious to him. Why did he fight with his own daughter for no reason? ZMO looked at his senior martial uncle, feeling like crying. You really have to teach him properly. Zhu Yao seemed to have noticed his earnest eyes, as she turned to glance at Yu Yao. Finally she spoke up. You won. Of course. Yu Luo proudly waved her little fist. That's good. Zhu Yao once again turned cold and aloof. ZMO, however, was dumbfounded. It was over just like that. That's good. Good my ass. Is this how you teach your disciple? Yu Yao. ZMO was anxious and shouted out. Yu Luo blanked, and finally saw ZMO at the side. Oh father, you're here as well. ZMO silently puked out blood. What did he mean by he was here as well? He had always been here, all right? Dad, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Master said that within these 2 years, she will break through to the 9th level of Qi cultivation. I'll go back and practice first. After saying that, she waved her little hand and skipped back to her thatched cottage. ZMO, that was this still his obedient daughter? Is there anything else? Zhu Yao silently glanced at ZMO. Was he chasing him away? ZMO had no choice but to grit his teeth. They went down the mountain. He wanted to go home and have a chat with his wife. What had martial uncle taught his daughter to become? Not only did she not have the slightest bit of gentleness that a woman should have, but she was also looking for trouble all day long. In the past, when she was young, it was just a prank. Everyone saw that she was a child, so they didn't mind. But now he was already 10 years old. Furthermore, with her cultivation, she was no longer playing pranks. Instead, she would take out her weapon and make a move. She would often beat up the new disciples whose cultivation was lower than hers, causing them to wail in pain. This was also very worrying, all right? Especially for a disciple with a unique identity like Xiao Yuan. Naturally, he would not go to Jade Forest Mountain to complain to Zhu Yao, and would only look for him. Sigh, as expected. Children were all debts from the previous life, and he must have gone bankrupt in his previous life. Though, Zhu Yao was at ease with Yuluo. Don't say that she's young, but she's actually very smart. Her temper was also very good, and she would not easily fight with others, unless someone said something in front of her about her spirit root. Furthermore, she knew when to stop and when to stop. She was only teaching him a lesson and wouldn't really hurt him. The strictest rule Zhu Yao had for her was that she could not harm anyone's life. No matter what the original intention was, life was the most precious and fairest thing in this world. Everyone only had one chance, and no one had the right to take it away. The reason why Xiao Yi's 3 views were not right was because he had been living at the bottom of society from the very beginning. Others viewed him as an ant, so he desperately climbed up. The laughable thing was, when he stood at the top, he became the same as those people he once hated. He did not treat other people's lives as anything, and even stepped on them as though they were in the right. She did not wish for Yuluo to become someone like that. Because of her extreme inferiority, it caused her personality to become twisted. However, she did not wish for Yuluo to become someone who was too conceited either. Hence, she had to have her own bottom line, and this bottom line was set by her. That was life. However, in this cultivation world where human lives were like grass, to make her understand that life was more important than anything else was not an easy task. The bug imprint on Yuluo's face, although it was very faint, and could not be seen if one did not look carefully, it still did not disappear. Zhu Yao did not know if her current teachings were correct. On one hand, she was afraid that she was too weak to have the ability to protect herself, and on the other hand, she was afraid that she would be too strong and walk to the extreme. Even Zhu Yao was a little anxious. Bug, just what kind of bug are you? When Yulua was 12, she had already broken through to the 9th level of essence, and when she was 14, she had already reached the essence paragon. As someone with a single spirit vein, her cultivation speed was extremely fast as well. She heard that back then, the personal succeeding disciple of Sword Mountain who passed away early also had a single spirit vein and only reached the paragon level at the age of 15. What was that person's name again? Zhu Yao could not remember. Yet Yulua was faster than him by a year. Zhu Yao was prepared to wait for her for another year, and after she stabilized her realm, she would then let her build her foundation. However, on the night before Yulua built her foundation, Zhu Yao's late precognitive dream finally came. This time was no exception. She once again dreamed of a person's life, but strangely, this person was not Yuluo, but a woman called Mu Meiyan. Speaking of this Mu Meiyan, she could be considered a tragedy. She was not a disciple of Ancient Hills sect, but a second-rate deity sect, Azure Melancholy sect's head disciple. Her background was extremely good as well. She was the sect master's daughter, and when she was born, her glory was limitless. However, one day a heretic practitioner suddenly came, and then her entire sect was annihilated. She narrowly escaped with her life, and then, according to her father's words before his death, she sought refuge in Celestial Indus sect, and became a disciple of Sovereign Qi Han, who was similarly a demigod. In the beginning, it was still pretty good. She worked hard in her studies, worked hard and so on. For her father's sake, Qi Han got whatever he wanted, until little junior martial sister Yu Hanxin came up the mountain, and Qi Han took her in as his disciple. This Mu Meiyan immediately became an expired daylily. She could not bear it, and thus, she used all sorts of methods to go against little junior martial sister, plotting and framing her. Unfortunately, little junior martial sister carried various immunity buffs, and was able to avert danger every single time. Furthermore, her protagonist's aura was fully activated, attracting a large number of admirers. Even her master, Qi Han, who was said to practice the emotionless sword arts, had his heart moved. She was truly a Mary Sue. In the end, because of Mu Meiyan's framing, a past event was pulled out. So little junior martial sister was not even a normal practitioner. Millions of years ago, she defeated the heavenly devil and sacrificed herself for the Tao, deity Baiyu. A strand of her remnant soul floated in the world for millions of years, before she was able to reincarnate into a little girl's body and once again cultivate. Mu Meiyan was like a vicious female antagonist, courting death along the way. Not only did she help little junior martial sister gain a large number of fans and suitors, she even conveniently found her memories from her past life, and even pulled a bunch of hatred for herself. Number 1 heretic practitioner, number 1 disciple of a sect, deities who met with misfortune, and even her master Qi Han, all of them hated her to the bone. Zhu Yao silently gave a thumbs up for this person's taunting skill. A person like this was definitely a main tank existence in online games. Even bosses would chase after her and hit her in the face. Putting aside the fact that Mu Meiyan was expelled from the sect, she was even captured. Because she possessed the water and would dual spirit veins, she became a cauldron for heretic practitioners. In the end, she was raped all the way, and her cultivation level fell from the nascent soul stage to the essence stage. Before her death, she heard that little junior martial sister, who attracted countless suitors, did not choose a single lover, and ascended by herself. And her master, whom she had always been secretly in love with, was struck to death by heavenly lightning when he ascended because of his longing for her. Although Zhu Yao sympathized a little with this unfortunate female antagonist, a pitiful person would definitely have some hateful aspects. Along the way, she was the one who courted death due to her hot-headedness. No matter how saintly the female lead was, she could not stop her death-seeking footsteps. Zhu Yao thought that the dream would end here. And just as she was about to retort about this plot, that was completely unrelated to Little Radish. A thunderous rumble resounded, and the connection came. Because the female antagonist had reincarnated. That's right, this was actually a reincarnated leftover story. And she even died. Why the hell didn't she reincarnate into her own body? Instead, she reincarnated into her disciple, Little Radish's body. And the Little Radish in the dream was a little different from the one she raised. The Little Radish here was timid and weak, and had an extreme sense of inferiority. Because she possessed a single water spirit vein. No matter where she went, there would be people pointing fingers at her. Unlike now, where everyone was basically afraid of her, the moment the radish passed by, there would be chaos. And for her safety, ZMO had never taught her any mystic arts. Hence she, who did not have the ability to protect herself, had always locked herself in the Sword Mountain and never left her house. Until the day she turned 20, during the intersect tournament, a disciple from another sect unintentionally barged into her courtyard. Seeing her body, the radish could not bear the humiliation, and bit her tongue to commit suicide. And then, clang clang clang, the female antagonist magnificently reincarnated. And because of the radish's eagerness to die, the female antagonist's reincarnation did not receive any resistance from the original owner's soul, and directly took over her body. What was even more ridiculous was, because of this reincarnation, the radish's water spirit vein had mutated into an ice spirit vein. After that, she had to fight various monsters to level up and settle scores with the female lead after she returned. In the end, the female antagonist's counterattack was successful, and she subdued a group of men who should have belonged to the female lead, Yuhanshin. And they were especially awesome, acting like hoodlums along the way. And they only cared about lust and not love, including her master in her previous life, Chihan. And her little junior martial sister, Yuhanshin, was not someone easy to deal with either. She was a reincarnated deity in the first place, and in her previous life, she had even defeated the so-called heavenly devil. After being dealt such a blow by Mu Meiyan, after she awakened her past powers, she raised her spirits and swore to fight to the death with the female antagonist. Hence, the two of them began a great battle of 20,000 years. One had the power of her previous life, while the other had a large group of male antagonists as her teammates. Both of their strengths were equally matched, and in the end, Mu Meiyan naturally won. However, because her injuries were too heavy, she died. However, the entire cultivation world was more or less destroyed by the two of them. It had basically become a land of death. Zhu Yao's expression darkened as she watched. Although she had read quite a few stories of female antagonists' counterattack, she had never seen one as ruthless as this Mu Meiyan. Let's not talk about that pile of dissolute debts. Why did she not even spare Little Radish's parents, ZMO and his wife? And she even said that she was avenging the original owner. Chapter 95. Zhu Yao retorted as she opened her eyes. What kind of bullshit plot was this? The female antagonist's counterattack. This was clearly a battle of demonic arts. In my previous life, your men were better than mine. In this life, I must snatch all the men over or something like that. She's simply too capable. Will I die without men? Can your taste be a little more noble? Can you be a little more broad-minded? Be careful of your kidney deficiency, mama's egg. I would rather you dominate the world. That would be easier. Also, the female antagonist's first sentence after reincarnating was actually, "This time, I will definitely make all the men crawl under my body." Let me say something impure. Just how big is that place of yours? Coo. I accidentally became evil. She was a pure child. Calm down, calm down. She finally understood why the word bug on Little Radish's face was so faint. So the real bug was not her. She was merely a shell that contained the bug. And on the day she turned 20, the real show would begin. No, she definitely had to stop this. Little Radish was currently her disciple. If she could not even protect her own disciple's body, then there was no need for her to continue living. After deciding, Zhu Yao called Yuluo to her room that very night. Little Radish had already grown into a big radish. In this world, 14 years old, she could be considered as a big lady. The current her was lacking the extroverted liveliness of the past, and had grown a little more reserved. Perhaps, every child's personality would change a little when they grow up. "You Luo," Zhu Yao said with a heavy tone. "Your master has performed a divination for you, and discovered that you will face a great calamity when you turn 20. On Yu Luo's calm face, the corner of her lips suddenly twitched. She sighed deeply and said, "Master, stop teasing me. Tell me, what supper do you want to eat? I will make it." Zhu Yao was stumped for a moment. Frowning, she tried her best to maintain her cold demeanor. "Nonsense, your master is talking about serious matters. Am I someone who would disturb someone's sleep in the middle of the night just to eat supper?" Yu Luo faintly looked over. "All right, she is. As expected. Disciples and whatnot, the older they get, the more disobedient they are. A grown disciple cannot be kept at home." This little radish still listened to her in the past. But why did she become more rebellious as she grew older? Whatever thoughts she had would usually be seen through by her with a single glance. "Not happy? I really have proper business this time." Zhu Yao coughed. "Your grandmaster once taught me some divination techniques." Yu Luo's expression instantly became much more solemn. All right, sure enough, the title of master was more useful than her. This technique can only be used once in a person's life. "I just calculated your fate, and found that when you were 20 years old, you faced a great calamity, and your life was at stake." Yu Luo was silent. "Little Luo, Yu Luo, do you want to become stronger?" Her expression turned stern. "Your disciple has been thinking about you all the time. But my spirit root." "Since that's the case," Zhu Yao interrupted, "then let me see your determination." There were some things that she had been experimenting with for almost 9 years. It was about time to teach her. "Tomorrow, you'll reach foundation establishment. Today the weather is fine, wind and calendar." It was a good day for foundation establishment. Although Little Radish was a little puzzled by her sudden request for him to build his foundation, he had always trusted his master. Early in the morning, he obediently followed his master to the edge of the cold pond at the peak of the mountain. Zhu Yao casually placed down a few spiritual guidance formations, and had Little Radish sit at the center of the formation. This spiritual guidance formation was a little special. She altered a few small details of the formation, and it would only draw in the densest type of spiritual energy in the surroundings. And the densest type of spiritual energy at the edge of the water was naturally water spiritual energy. In these few years, she had read through all of the formation jade tablets her master had left behind. Although it could not be said that she had mastered all of them, she still knew how to place down a few simple formations. Adding that she was a planner in the first place, it was naturally easy for her to modify or adjust some of the small details. And these modifications could usually make the formations even more stable and mature. However, she had yet to thoroughly study a large-scale formation like the Great Mountain Barrier Formation. She simply faintly felt that this large-scale formation contained tens of thousands of small-scale formations, and they complemented each other. They could operate on their own without the need for manpower. It must be known that normal formations either did not rely on the spiritual energy of the formation user to support them, or they relied on spirit stones to maintain them. Especially for large-scale formations like the Great Mountain Barrier Formation, the consumption of spirit stones would be an astronomical figure. However, ancient hill sex formations did not require that. It was as though they could operate on their own, even if they did not need to care about them. Zhu Yao guessed that there must be countless formations that could automatically absorb spiritual energy to replenish themselves, which was why they could save so much money. After all, her master's storage pouch did not even contain a single spirit stone. When you build your foundation, it will most likely be a little painful. Don't panic. Just follow the method of absorbing spiritual energy in the past, and guide it into your body. Zhu Yao explained a few things based on her own experience, and then, she carefully thought about the instructions her master left behind, to see if there was anything else. There was no helping it. She herself had built her foundation in a daze, and basically did not have any experience that could be imparted. She could only rely on herself to comprehend it. After giving Little Radish "I have high hopes for you," my disciple expression, she sat down at the side, and began to guard her. Yu Yao closed her eyes, and began to absorb spiritual energy into her body. Zhu Yao looked at the blue spots of light at the side, which were slowly approaching her, and then they entered her body in an unstable manner. As though they had discussed it beforehand, there was no big squeezing situation. Zhu Yao suddenly recalled that every time she absorbed spiritual energy, the spiritual energy that was desperately squeezing into her body, as though it wanted to burst her to death. She silently sighed. As expected, comparing oneself to others was truly infuriating. She had thought that building her foundation was just a matter of sitting for a while. After all, she was just like that, and it was done in a single night. However, her disciple had been sitting for 3 whole days. Zhu Yao felt as though grass was about to grow on her. Yet, the other party did not show any signs of leveling up at all. What happened to the promise done in a blink of an eye? If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have stayed here to guard her. Just as Zhu Yao was thinking if she should sneak away and return after her disciple had truly begun building her foundation, she suddenly realized that the formation on Jade Forest Mountain was showing signs of loosening. With a thought, she arrived at the foot of the mountain. However, she could not see a single human figure in her surroundings. Could it be her imagination? Zhu Yao walked to the side of the formation that had been activated and realized that there were indeed traces of modifications on the formation. There were indeed traces of modification. Zhu Yao frowned. Squatting down, she once again adjusted that formation back. As she was pondering who would be so daring as to enter Jade Forest Mountain, she suddenly heard a voice filled with warmth coming from behind. Jiangling. Zhu Yao turned around. However, she bumped into a pair of eyes that seemed to be filled with a myriad of tenderness. At that moment, she simply felt her legs buckle, and she almost fell. It was actually Feng Yi, senior marshal's sister. Feng Yi. Calm down, calm down. Right now, she was no longer Jiangling Yu. It was impossible for Feng Yi to recognize her. Amen, where's her cold arrogance? Hang it up, hang it up. The moment Zhu Yao turned around, the joy and tenderness on Feng Yi's face instantly extinguished, and then, she once again returned to a cold expression, which even carried a hint of deathly stillness. Junior Marshal's sister Zhu. She lightly sighed, as though she was extremely disappointed. Senior Marshal's sister, why are you so free to come to my Jade Forest Mountain? Feng Yi's expression sank, as though she was suppressing something. Raising her head, she looked at the bright moon in the sky and muttered, I don't know either. Perhaps, if he was still here, this place should be the place he wanted to come the most, right? Zhu Yao's heart trembled. The he she was talking about couldn't be her, right? Oh no, don't be infatuated with this big sister. This big sister has even told you my name, I'm just a passerby. Feng Yi lightly laughed, as though she was mocking herself a little. He definitely isn't willing to see me. After all, it's because I'm the disciple I took in. That's why he. Her face was filled with loneliness and guilt. Even Zhu Yao was beginning to feel a little embarrassed from the way she looked at him. She didn't feel that her death earlier was because of her, right? Life and death are up to fate. Senior Marshal's sister, there's no need to worry too much about it. Hurry and find your second spring. There's no happiness for people of the same sex. Feng Yi glanced at her, and then gave a bitter smile. I simply wish to see him one last time. If I had known that this would be the end, back then, I wouldn't have. If life is only as good as when we first met. If life is only as good as when we first met, I wouldn't have any fucking love left in this world, big sister. I beg you, don't do this anymore. Senior Marshal's sister, everyone has their own destiny. I believe that old friend of yours wouldn't be willing to see you so sad either. Zhu Yao advised, life is short. It's best to let go of what you should. Perhaps, you two can meet again in your next life? In her next life, she shouldn't cross over to another world. Just be a flower on a high mountain. Feng Yi was startled for a moment, and only then did she solemnly look at her. As though she had thought of something, she sighed and said, You're right. He protected me that much, so he definitely wouldn't be willing to see me so sad. What a joke, girl. The first half of her sentence was just a courtesy. The second half was the main point. Hey. Thank you. Feng Yi nodded at her, and then said with a light smile. Your personality is rather similar to his. Alarm bells instantly rang in Zhu Yao's heart. Don't scare me, big sister. Back then, when she was at version 2.0, that person said she was similar, and then she was exposed. Alright, just who was that person again? That's not important anymore. In any case, she wouldn't dare to expose herself even if she was beaten to death. Cold. She hurriedly picked up her mask. Junior Martial Sister seems to have just entered the demigod stage not too long ago. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to look for me at Beast Taming Mountain. Cuckoo, thank you, Senior Martial Sister. Zhu Yao courteously bowed. Senior Martial Sister, your taste is too heavy. Even if you beat me to death, I wouldn't dare to look for you to chat. Zhu Yao, who had finally put back her cold mask, did not even bother to be polite. Using the excuse that she wanted to see her own disciple, she escaped. Fengyi, however, still stood at the same spot. She sighed at the moon for a long time, before reluctantly returning. Zhu Yao returned with a head filled with cold sweat, only to realize her disciple's aura was a little unstable. Her forehead was already beginning to sweat, and her expression was a little painful. She was already about to build her foundation. Zhu Yao immediately added a few spiritual energy guiding formations for her, to ensure that the spiritual energy was sufficient. Yet Little Radish's spiritual energy absorption speed was still very slow. It seemed as though with every strand of spiritual energy she absorbed, the pain on her body would increase. Her little face had already begun to distort, and it could be imagined how much pain she was in. Zhu Yao had experienced this pain before as well, but because her spiritual energy absorption speed was too fast, even if it was pain, it would only last for a single moment. Yet she had to grind it bit by bit, and she could not even stop. Zhu Yao anxiously watched from the side. Little Radish's painful expression lasted for an entire day. When the sun set on the second day, her spiritual energy absorption speed had evidently slowed down. However, her expression became more and more painful. This was a crucial moment. If she could endure it, she would successfully build her foundation. If she could not, then her meridians would be damaged, and her spirit vein would be destroyed. Chapter 96. The more Zhu Yao watched, the more anxious she became. Seeing that Yu Luo's body had already stopped taking in spiritual energy, she could not help but remind her. Yu Luo, remember what you told me? Don't you want to become stronger? Let me tell you now. There is nothing in this world that is stronger than the water spirit root. If you believe in me, then hold on for me. Little Radish, who was still weak and feeble earlier, suddenly blanked for a moment, as though he had heard her words. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Xian gritted his teeth and continued to draw in spiritual energy. Just like that, another day passed. The expression on her face slowly calmed down, and so did her breathing. On the 6th day, when the sun rose from the surface of the sea, she finally opened her eyes. She still looked a little weak, but she had the same adorable expression as when she was young and smiled at her. Master, I succeeded. Zhu Yao reached out her hand to stroke her head and gave her a thumbs up. Good job, as expected of my disciple. If the disciple learned well, it was definitely because the master taught him well. Yes, the truth. Yu Luo smiled, tilted her head, and fell into her embrace. She was so tired that she fell asleep. Zhu Yao checked her pulse and sent a strand of spiritual energy into her body, realizing that although the meridians in her body had expanded by quite a bit, there were no signs of them being damaged. Only then did she feel at ease and carried her disciple back home. Since Little Radish had built his foundation, then she slightly heaved a sigh of relief. After all, the higher the cultivation of a person, the more difficult it would be to take over their body. In the dream, the reason why Mu Meiyan's possession was so successful was completely because the Little Radish back then was just a mortal. Putting aside the fact that he did not have the slightest bit of cultivation, he did not even have the slightest desire to live. And right now, Little Radish was already a foundation stage cultivator. If he wanted to take over her body, he would have to see if she agreed to it or not. Yu Luo rested for an entire day. Only then did he recover his vitality. Early in the morning of the second day, Zhu Yao was already standing on the largest lawn on the mountain peak, waiting for her with a domineering air. Master. Yuluo bowed according to the rules. She was clearly a little excited, faintly feeling that the next moment would be the moment for her to change her fate. Amen. Zhu Yao nodded. Right now it was time to witness a miracle. Little Radish, show me your strongest move. Master, my name is Yuluo. Yuluo's face darkened. Although she knew that her master appeared to be proper on the surface, he would occasionally have some incomprehensible bad taste. But at the very least, he should cover it up a little. Yuluo sighed. Accepting his fate, he took a step forward and focused his mind. He circulated his spiritual energy, which was much richer than before. Then with all his might, he shot out a dozen or so icicles, which struck the stone wall not far away. Then it was smashed to pieces and fell to the ground. As expected, Zhu Yao shook her head. She knew that she would use ice-type mystic arts. She believed that since she possessed the water spirit vein, only ice-type mystic arts were the most suitable. This way of thinking was both right and wrong. It just needed to be slightly modified. Little Radish, how do you cast your ice-type arts? Zhu Yao asked. I'm not Little Radish, hey. Yuluo was speechless. However, he still answered honestly. Naturally, it's to convert the water spiritual energy in my body into ice spiritual energy, and then send it out again. Then do you know how ice is formed? Zhu Yao continued to ask. Yuluo practically did not hesitate as she blurted out. Of course it's the ice spiritual energy. She was wrong. Why did she have to explain these simple physical phenomena to someone who had no knowledge of physics? Forget it, she would just let her see the truth. Zhu Yao waved her hand, and in an instant, several icicles struck straight onto the stone wall. So fast. Master, do you have the ice spirit vein? Usually, only those with the ice spirit vein would be able to cast mystic arts this fast. However, she immediately rejected her own guess. No, Master is Sovereign Yu Yan's disciple. You can only have the lightning spirit vein. In a certain sense, she was right. Right now, she no longer simply possessed the lightning spirit vein, but the all-element spirit vein. In the entire market, she had everything she needed. This is what I wanted to tell you. Zhu Yao explained. The difference between spirit veins, other than cultivation speed, is naturally the speed of casting mystic arts. Those with the corresponding spirit veins can directly use the spiritual energy in their bodies, while those without will first have to convert their spiritual energy. I highly approve of you using ice-type mystic arts, because the ice spirit vein is mutated from the water spirit vein. Yuluo said. Hence, compared to other mystic arts, converting water spiritual energy into ice spiritual energy is much easier. Your way of thinking isn't wrong, however. There's an even faster method. Zhu Yao said. If you want to convert spiritual energy, you first have to guide the energy, then turn it into spiritual energy, then guide it out of your body, and then form it into icicles. This requires 3 steps. No matter how skilled you are, there will always be a communal cooldown period. A communal enemy? I'm sorry, I accidentally switched to a professional term. What I mean is, if you can skip these steps and directly transfer water spiritual energy, and then turn it into icicles, wouldn't it be faster? Yuluo's eyes widened as she looked at her with a face of disbelief. How is that possible? Little Radish, under what circumstances will water turn into ice? Naturally, when the weather is cold. Yuluo suddenly came to a realization, as she looked at her with a joyful expression. She hurriedly walked to the pond at the side, reached out her hand, and transferred water spiritual energy. The pond water swayed for a moment and slowly, a stream of water rose towards her palm. However, when it approached her palm, it slowly turned into an ice pillar. Success, Master. Amen. Zhu Yao nodded. It seemed like she had already understood. Actually, the water spirit vein was completely no different from the ice spirit vein. It was just that there was an additional step to reduce the temperature. You just have to practice more, and you will be able to use it freely. Yes, Master. Yuluo's eyes were filled with joy, and a moment later, she seemed to have thought of a problem. But Master, if I want to transfer water into ice, I have to first transfer water out, and then use water to freeze it. But earlier, Master clearly The ice pillar she saw earlier completely did not have the process of freezing water. Zhu Yao took a step forward. Little radish, where do you think water is? Yu Luo blinked for a moment before replying. Rivers, rivers, lakes. Naturally, there's also the ocean. Oh, sometimes there's water underground as well. Wrong. Zhu Yao knocked on her head. Actually, water is the same as spiritual energy, it's everywhere. Zhu Yao snapped her fingers, and in an instant, a gigantic cube of ice fell from the sky, and with a clang, it smashed onto the ground. Yu Luo was dumbfounded. This, even if she were to use all of the spiritual energy in her body, forget about condensing such a large cube of ice. Even if it was this much water, it would still be impossible to instantaneously condense it. Master, where did this come from? Air. Air contained a large amount of water vapor, and water vapor would turn into water upon contact with cold. This was basic common sense. Of course, in the composition of air, hydrogen and oxygen were everywhere, while the formation of water was very simple. H2O. This was the simplest chemical formula. She had simply casually formed this equation in the air. However, explaining this was a little troublesome. Furthermore, she had experimented many times as well. With her demigod cultivation, she was able to differentiate which was hydrogen and which was oxygen from the so-called spiritual energy. Hence, she chose the concept of water vapor, which was easier to understand. As long as you place a layer of cold air in the sky, you will be able to harvest a pile of icicles. Little Radish learned from her. Yu Luo tested it according to her words, and indeed, there were quite a few hailstones falling from above their heads. Master, it's really possible. Yu Luo was so excited that she wanted to cry, as she excitedly caught the hailstones in the sky. In that case, the water spirit vein isn't a trash spirit vein. Master, you're right. As expected, you have a way. Amen. Zhu Yao continued to nod her head coldly, as she silently brushed away the ice cubes that were smashing on top of her head. No more hailstones, thank you. Master, how did you know all these? I accidentally thought of it. Zhu Yao patted on her shoulders and said with a heavy tone. You must remember, knowledge can change one's fate. Ah, what did she mean? Yu Luo was confused. Zhu Yao's face was stern. If you're excited just by knowing these, then wouldn't you go crazy later on? In this way, you'll get twice the result with half the effort when you learn ice spells. However, it's only enough to protect yourself. If you encounter a practitioner with a much higher cultivation than you, I'm afraid it'll be very dangerous. Yu Luo lowered her head. She had the constitution of a human cauldron. Even if she didn't make enemies with others, there would be people who would rush to find trouble with her. Her master had only given her a clear path, giving her a direction to advance Indiana. However, if she were to encounter an expert, she would be completely powerless to retaliate. Master, I will become stronger. It would be fine as long as he became invincible, right? I have a sure win method. Ah! Zhu Yao hooked her hand, signaling her to step forward. She needed to spread a general knowledge that could not be known by others. Do you know what flows in the human body? Flowery? Yu Luo was stunned for a moment before she replied. Blood? Stupid. Zhu Yao suddenly understood a little how her master felt when he was facing her back then, and how he felt exasperated at her for failing to meet his expectations. He had already hinted to this extent, so why was she still not enlightened? Sesame. Zhu Yao decided to do another experiment. Roar Roar Sesame made a resounding entrance. With a wave of Zhu Yao's hand, a ray of light struck towards it. A wound immediately appeared on Sesame's tail, and blood instantly flowed out. Meow Sesame's domineering aura completely disappeared, as it looked at Zhu Yao with teary eyes. Its eyes were filled with disbelief. Mistress, how can you be so heartless, so unrighteous, and so unreasonable? Zhu Yao simply ignored its little eyes. She walked in front of the little pool of blood, and reached out her hand. The blood on the ground was slowly rising, and in an instant, it had frozen into a blood-colored ice pillar. Yu Luo, master means to say, blood contained water as well, and by directly freezing a person's blood into ice, even if she could not kill them in a single strike, she could still heavily injure them. Yuluo was dumbfounded for a moment, and suddenly understood what this meant. This was clearly an invincible mystic art. Master only allowed me to learn water control arts in the past. Could it be because... Chapter 97. Damn it, she didn't dare to talk about immortals after ascension. But these cultivators were still humans. Moreover, 70% of the human body was made up of water. The water spirit root could control water. What was so useless about it? As expected, uncultured people were terrifying. Yuluo has never heard of these techniques before. Master, did you create them for your disciple? Yuluo's eyes were still wet. I guess so. Actually, it was the chemistry and physics teachers who taught her. Master, this disciple will definitely not let Master down. Yuluo respectfully kowtowed towards her. Her eyes were sparkling like stars. Zhuyao heaved a sigh of relief as well. This little radish, ever since she found out that she possessed the water spirit vein, although she did not say anything, she had always been a little pessimistic. Although her cultivation level had never fallen. In the end, she just did not want to disappoint her. However, there was always a knot in his heart. He believed that he had a trash spirit root. Not only would he not be able to bring glory to his sect, but he would also bring endless trouble to himself. Therefore, it was inevitable for her to feel inferior. But today, the haze in her eyes had completely disappeared. With her current fighting spirit, even if she was really possessed like in the dream, she would fight with all her might. However, Little Radish, this technique is a little too brutal for someone with a water spiritual root. I only taught you to protect yourself, so unless it's absolutely necessary, don't use it easily, understand? Although knowledge could change one's fate, it could also bring disaster. It might even change the current balance of spiritual roots. She didn't want to stop a bug, only to have her disciple become another bug. Yuluo naturally knew that this technique was no small matter. She raised her right hand and said solemnly, Disciple Yuluo hereby swears on my heart demon that I will not use this technique unless I have no other choice. Furthermore, I will not teach this cultivation method to anyone else. If I break this oath, I am willing to die under the hands of my inner demons and never be able to reincarnate. Well done. You have to be an upright and good girl. Zhu Yao gave a few more instructions. After all, she had just built her foundation, so it was best for her to stabilize her realm as soon as possible. Mistress, Sesame called out in dissatisfaction. It shook its injured tail. Mistress, did you call me out just to cut off my tail? Sob sob sob. Master, how can you treat beastie like this? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at it. You're a 9th rank, oh no. You're a 10th rank demonic beast now. Do you have to be like this? Isn't it just a small wound? Zhu Yao waved her hand unconcernedly. Your skin is so thick that you can't even endure a small wound like this? But it's a small wound. It hurts too. Also, its pure glass heart was broken, okay? Then bear with it. Zhu Yao could not be bothered with it. Just treat it as a visit from your great uncle today. Sesame was startled. Uncle, what kind of rice is that? His ancestors were all beasties. He didn't have any relatives? After that lesson, Little Radish had been diligently practicing her ice-type mystic arts. She had just built her foundation, and her realm was still not stable yet. Zhu Yao decided to let her go into closed-door training for a period of time to stabilize her realm. Little Radish also knew that it was not the time to be anxious, and obediently went into closed-door training at the bottom of the cold lake. Zhu Yao placed down a few defensive formations in the surroundings. While she was at it, she even sealed the great formation of Jade Forest Mountain, preventing anyone from entering. After pondering for a while, she went to greet ZMO, and had him pay more attention to the situation of Jade Forest Mountain. Only then did she leave Ancient Hill Sect. Zhu Yao calculated, it was about time to pick up a male antagonist. Based on what she saw in her dreams, there was an especially important person in Mu Meiyan's harem, and he was a devil practitioner with the demonic physique. He was originally a mortal with tri-spirit veins. Mu Meiyan found him based on the memories of her past life, and was one step ahead of Yu Hanxing. She saved his life, and from then on, she became the white moonlight in his heart. However, this person was a little unlucky. Later on, he was captured by a heretic practitioner and suffered endless torture. Coincidentally, he discovered a remnant page of an ancient scroll of an ancient devil practitioner. After cultivating it, he realized that he had the demonic physique. His cultivation base was rising rapidly. In the end, he even successfully stepped into the path of devils. In the end, in order to save Mu Meiyan, he directly turned into a devil. Under the control of his devil nature, he even opened the seal of the ancient devil. Hence, the cultivation world, which was initially almost destroyed by the Great War, once again welcomed a wave of disaster caused by the devil. Currently, this person should still be in the mortal realm. Although Little Radish's possession was the catalyst that started everything, this person's dark transformation into a devil was the final straw that brought the world to its end. Hence, in order to guard against the unexpected, no matter if Mu Meiyan was reborn or not, she had to make two preparations. After Zhu Yao was done with her preparations, she made a trip to the mortal realm. According to her memories, she arrived at a small city in the south. Concealing her figure, she used her divine sense to search for that person. Currently, he should still be a child. As expected, a moment later there was a result. That person was at a secluded corner in the west of the city, and he seemed to have encountered a little trouble. With a thought, Zhu Yao instantly appeared on the rooftop of the scene of the incident. This place should be a dilapidated ruin, and the house seemed to have been left uninhabited for a long time. Not far in front of her, 3 people and a little boy were currently in a confrontation. The 3 of them were all grown men, and currently, their faces were filled with rage. They were fiercely glaring at the boy who had already retreated to the corner of the wall. The boy was dressed in very shabby clothes, and his clothes were even stained with quite a bit of dirt. He was extremely skinny, and it seemed like he had not eaten a good meal for a long time, as his face was sallow. "Stinky brat, run again." One of the men spat out a mouthful of saliva and roughly pushed the child's shoulder. In an instant, the child's weak and small body was flung onto the wall. The child seemed to be in extreme pain and could not recover even after a long while. However, he stubbornly gritted his teeth and did not make a sound. "You dare to steal this old man's money? You must be tired of living." Another man lifted the child and ruthlessly gave him a slap. Various curses were constantly coming out of his mouth. The other man was jeering as well. That's right. Beat this reckless brat to death." Only then did Zhu Yao realize that the little boy was tightly holding onto a money pouch. So he had actually stolen something. It was no wonder he was beaten up. The man whose money was stolen gave the child a few slaps. Seeing that the corner of his mouth was bleeding and that he was about to faint, he then snatched back his own money pouch. He casually threw the child away and began to carefully inspect his own money pouch. "Big bro, what do we do now?" another man asked. Though this child was despicable, killing him would be even more troublesome. That man carried the money pouch and swept a glance at the little boy, who was still curled up on the ground. Suddenly he gave a vulgar smile and gave the 2 men beside him a look. "Brothers, do you want to vent your anger?" The other 2 men immediately came to a realization, and their eyes shone with a few rays of light. However, they said a little hesitantly, "But this is a boy. What do you know?" The man whose money was stolen slapped his head. "Do you know that nowadays, it's the most popular for rich families to raise boys like this? After we're done playing with him, we can even sell him off and earn another sum of money. Boss is wise after all." The other 2 men immediately nodded and walked towards the child with lewd smiles on their faces. With a fierce tug, they pulled open the child's shirt. Though the child's face was yellowish and ugly, his body was very clean, and the few men's lusts were overflowing. At this moment, the child woke up as well. When he realized what these people were trying to do, he desperately struggled. Let me go. However, he was just a child, so how could he struggle against 3 grown men? The man raised his hand and gave him another slap, causing half of his face to swell up. The child was seeing stars from the slap, and the strength he used to struggle had weakened as well. However, he was really panicking now, and could no longer hold himself back from crying. However, he was unable to stop the few men, and his pants had already been roughly pulled down by the men. Seeing this, Zhu Yao understood that it was time for her to take action. In her dreams, Mu Meiyan had helped him when he was in danger as well, and that was why he remembered her kindness in his heart. Zhu Yao flew down from the roof and lightly cast a wind-type mystic art, flinging the 3 men away. The 3 men were flung a few meters away, and only stopped when they crashed into a broken wall. Brave young man, hurry and create a miracle. Who's there? The 3 men crawled up in a sorry state, however. When they looked around, they did not see anyone. The hell, she forgot that she was invisible. The 3 men looked for a long while, and felt a little guilty in the depths of their hearts. One of them said, "Big brother, it can't be a ghost, right? I heard that this place used to be the old city district, and those kinds of things often appear." That big brother seemed to have grown a little bolder, as he spat at his little brother. Not believing in the supernatural, he once again stepped forward to grab the little boy. Zhu Yao frowned. Did these people use their lower bodies to think? Then, don't blame me for snatching away your thinking tools. With their actions earlier, if she wasn't here, they really would have taken turns to have sex. And the other party was just a child who was about 10 years old. He was simply even more beastly than a beast. Zhu Yao once again materialized wind blades. This time, there were 3 of them, and they flew straight towards the 3 men's lower bodies. In an instant, the 3 of them held onto their lower bodies, which were bleeding profusely, as they rolled on the ground in pain. Ghost, big brother, there must be a ghost. The 3 men's faces were pale. It was unknown if it was because of the fear, or because of the pain. However, all of them scrambled away. Only then did Zhu Yao remove her invisibility, and revealed herself. She walked to the corner, only to see that the child was still squatting there. His pair of eyes, however, were staring blankly forward, without any focus. Are you all right? Zhu Yao probed. The child did not have any reaction at all, and simply hugged her even tighter. It seemed like he was frightened. Zhu Yao hesitated for a moment, before reaching out her hand. Where do you live? Big sister will send you home. The child finally had some reaction, as he blankly turned his head to look at her. Zhu Yao tried her best to return him a gentle smile. The child finally burst into tears. She carried the child up, and while wiping his tears for him, she comforted him. All right. It's all right now. Big sister has chased away the bad guys. Don't cry anymore. The child, however, cried even sadder. He tightly grabbed onto her clothes, and wiped off the snot and mucus on her body. Zhu Yao. That everything needed a buffer period. So Zhu Yao decided not to persuade him any longer, and allowed him to cry his fill. Chapter 98. Sister. The boy finally stopped crying. He rubbed his big red eyes and said weakly, I'm hungry. Zhu Yao stroked his head. It's good that he stopped crying. She carried the child on her back. Let's go, big sis will bring you to eat. In order to create a glorious image of him as her savior, Zhu Yao brought him to the most luxurious restaurant in the city, and ordered a table full of the most expensive food. Sure enough, the child stared at her with bright eyes, but also looked at her with a little fear. Eat it, it's all for you. She had already achieved grain liberation, so naturally she didn't need to eat. Moreover, she didn't know how long she would have to poop after eating. Therefore, he sat quietly at the side and watched the child eat heartily while sweeping the table. Zhu Yao pondered on how to prevent this child from walking on the path of a devil's cultivation. Perhaps she could try to change his fate and give him some capital to make a living, with the favor of saving his life this time as a comparison. Even if Mu Meiyan were to be reborn in the future, if she were to do it again, it would only be the icing on the cake, and she would no longer be the white moonlight in his heart. Perhaps she could even use this time's goodwill to instill in him some principles, such as maintaining world peace, and everyone's responsibility. Yes, this is very necessary. Zhu Yao had an idea, and the boy had already eaten his fill as well. His little stomach was already bulging out. However, he still looked at the half-eaten food with nostalgia. She looked at her hesitantly and asked, Big sister, can I bring the rest back to eat in the future? His cautious eyes, made Zhu Yao's heart ache a little when she looked at him. She once again stroked his head and said, "Of course you can. If it's not enough, tell big sis. I will call for more." "Thank you, big sister." The boy looked at her gratefully. He picked up the pot on the table and wanted to pour a cup of water for her, but found that there was no water in the pot. He obediently said, "I'll go pour some water for big sister." "Big sister, wait for me." Zhu Yao nodded. Suddenly, he recalled the little radish on the Jade Forest Mountain. If this child had a decent spirit vein, he could bring him back and raise him together with the little radish. However, in the dream, he seemed to have 3 spiritual roots. With an aptitude like this, even if he were to enter the inner sect of Ancient Hill Sect, there would still be some risks. Moreover, she felt that she shouldn't have brought him into the immortal sect. As Zhu Yao planned, she waited for the child to return. But who would have thought that after waiting for an hour, the person who came was not a boy, but a fiendish fat woman. As soon as the fat woman went upstairs, she pointed at her and said, "The window seat on the 2nd floor. That's right, it's her. Hurry up and arrest her." The 2 men behind her walked up with a rope. Zhu Yao was confused. However, how could a mortal without any spiritual energy approach her? Before he could even reach her table, he was repelled by her protective spiritual energy. "You actually dare to resist." The fat woman put her hands on her hips and pointed at her. "Let me tell you, your younger brother has already sold you to our spring garden. If you know what's good for you, you'll obediently follow me back to receive our guests." Younger brother? Receiving guests? Zhu Yao seemed to have figured something out in hindsight. Damn, that stinking brat. He sold her to a brothel. What happened to saving her life? This naughty child. Zhu Yao was fuming with anger. The cold and prideful mask on her face shattered into pieces. This unruly brat, if she were to catch him, she would definitely spank him until his buttocks blossomed. She casually walked towards the 3 people who were trying to capture her. She cast a forgetting art, causing them to forget about the matter of capturing her. Walking out of the restaurant, just as she was about to use her divine sense to search for traces of him, she suddenly realized that her hands were empty. Mama's egg. That little wimp actually stole the storage ring her master left for her. That ring had her master's imprint, and initially, she had to imprint her imprint on it before it could be considered as her possession. However, she had always been unwilling to remove her master's imprint. Adding that she could directly retrieve items from it in the first place, she had never thought of doing so. She never expected that because it did not have her imprint, she actually did not realize it when it was stolen by a mortal child. How embarrassing. Zhu Yao released her divine sense and immediately located the child's location. He was currently walking into a pawn shop. As expected, he planned on pawning her own ring. In the eyes of people without spiritual energy, that was just an extremely ordinary ring. Only practitioners would be able to recognize that it was a storage artifact. Zhu Yao once again concealed her figure, and with a thought, she instantly teleported into that pawn shop. Coincidentally, she heard the child's pleading voice. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment. She wanted to see just what this little brat was trying to do. "Shopkeeper, I beg of you. I'm really in urgent need of silver. My little brother has already been sick for 3 days. Please do me a favor. Let me pawn this in exchange for some medicine money." Unfortunately, the person behind the counter was unmoved. "Shoo shoo shoo, you actually want to pawn a lousy ring? Our pawn shop isn't a place that accepts trash. Hurry and leave." Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Lousy. When she recalled those mystic artifacts and treasures in the ring, her master would cry. The little boy seemed to be really anxious, as he once again begged that person several times. However, the shopkeeper still did not agree. Finally, he lost his patience, picked up a broom, and chased the boy out. The boy fell onto the ground from his push, and could only stand up while rubbing his bruised hand. With a limp, he regretfully walked away. Zhu Yao followed after him. The little boy walked into a remote alley, and then walked in front of a broken temple. Taking a deep breath, the dispirited look on his face earlier instantly revealed a smile. "I'm back." He pushed open the door and walked in. A boy who was wearing the same tattered clothes as him, but was a head taller than him, walked out, and fiercely glared at him. You still know to come back. Where's the silver? Did you manage to get the silver? The boy's smile froze on his face. Lowering his head, he looked as though he was admitting his mistake. No. Didn't you say you would get it back? The slightly older boy was furious. What about Tiger now? He's already that sick. I will think of a way, the boy explained. However, the older boy did not listen to him, and loudly said, No, we agreed on today. If you don't get the money, you can't stay in this house anymore. Big brother monkey tomorrow. I will definitely be able to do it tomorrow. The boy grew anxious. Shoo shoo shoo. The monkey pushed him away. You've already said that for a month. This time, no matter what you say, it won't work. Their quarrel alerted the people in the temple. Dozens of children walked out in groups of 2s and 3s, with both boys and girls included. Most likely, this group was his companions, but very soon, they might not be. Because in that group of people, no one stood up to speak up for him. There was no sympathy, no pity. They only pointed at him, full of anger at him for going back on his words. Children's words were always more direct and hurtful than adults. The boy could not argue. He could only hold back his tears that could not fall. He helplessly looked at this group of companions that he desperately wanted to integrate into, and anxiously shook his head. Big brother monkey, I saw him on the street today. A child who had just entered suddenly squeezed in and pointed at the boy. Today he stole Zhang Jianba's money bag. I just happened to see the 3 of them chasing after him. What? The monkey's face paled. His face was full of fear. You actually dared to steal that tyrant's money bag. I only did it for Tiger. Shut up. The monkey became even more furious. He stomped his feet and said, You're causing trouble for us. Quick, chase him out. If Zhang Jianba and the rest saw this, they would think that we're in cahoots with him. We'll be implicated for nothing. Yes. Chase him out. The others responded one after another, and forcefully pushed the boy out of the temple door. The boy lost his balance, and instantly fell into a ditch outside. His entire body was covered in muddy water, and his thin clothes were completely drenched. However, he sat in the ditch blankly, and did not move, as though he was frightened by the heartlessness of his companions. He sat for a while, before slowly crawling up. Like a wandering soul, he left the dilapidated temple. As he walked, he wiped away the tears that continuously flowed out from the corner of his eyes, but he did not cry out loud. Zhu Yao had been following behind him the entire time, and her anger had mostly dissipated. At this moment, she understood why he was not willing to accept her good intentions, and instead sold her out. Most probably, he had encountered too many such things, and knew the fickleness of human nature. That was why he did not dare to trust others so easily. After all, even his companions who lived together with him could betray him, let alone someone he had just met. Zhu Yao followed him for a while, before realizing that he did not have a clear destination, and was simply wandering around the city aimlessly. Only when he reached the restaurant where she brought him to eat, did he stop for a moment. Raising his head, he took a glance, and then, he silently continued to walk away. Devilish brat. Now you understand big sister's painstaking efforts. If I don't let you suffer a little, you won't know how to be obedient. Zhu Yao did not show herself the entire time, and was simply waiting for him to think things through himself. Otherwise, she would have once again charged over. She believed that he would definitely be able to do something like selling her out again. The child swayed as he walked around the city for 3 days. Most probably because he was really hungry, his steps were a little weak. Swaying as he walked towards a farmer's house, a few people suddenly popped out from behind, blocking his path. Stinky brat, I finally caught you. There were a total of 5 people in this group, and they were all adult men. Among them, there were 3 familiar faces. They were the 3 people who beat up the boy back then. However, the way they walked was a little strange. Zhu Yao raised her brows. This was the classic example of forgetting the pain after the scar had healed. If not for you, stinky brat, stealing my money pouch, I wouldn't have ended up in such a state. See if I don't beat you to death today. Zhang Jianba signaled his lackeys at the side with his eyes, and the few of them surrounded the boy like a swarm of bees. Let's see which demon or god will come and save you today. The boy took a step back a little out of fear, however. His face immediately sank again. With a look of despair, he looked at the people who were already rushing towards him. He did not even resist, and allowed himself to be grabbed by the few of them. This time, no one would come to save him. Perhaps death was also a form of release. The few men's anger did not lessen even a little because of the child's cooperation. Instead, they pushed the child onto the ground, raised their wooden sticks, and ruthlessly whipped the child. Chapter 99. The five of them looked at each other in dismay. Before they could figure out what was going on, the man who beat the man up was also sent flying a few meters away. The few of them were shocked and looked at the empty surroundings blankly. In the next moment, the wooden sticks in the hands of the other four people also flew out for no reason. Ghost! That ghost is back! A man suddenly screamed and scrambled away. The other four also woke up from their stupor and followed the man, fleeing in terror. The little boy was the only one left at the scene. He stared blankly, a little flustered, but also a little hopeful as he looked around. Zhu Yao sighed and revealed her figure. However, her face was no longer gentle. Instead, she wore a cold and aloof mask as she looked at the child. She didn't say anything and just stretched out her hand. The ring in the child's arms automatically flew back into her palm. Zhu Yao checked for a moment, and after realizing that not a single item was missing, she put it back on her hand. She took another look at the boy who was staring at her, then turned around and walked away without any reluctance. She walked for about a dozen steps before there was movement behind her. The boy had caught up to her. Zhu Yao did not care about him, and simply walked straight out of the city. She walked very slowly, at the normal speed of an adult, yet the child followed her anxiously. As he followed her out of the city, he maintained a distance of 5 to 6 steps the entire time. He did not get too close, but he did not lose sight of her. 2 hours later, they arrived at a small desolate path. Zhu Yao stopped and coldly said, "Why are you following me?" The corner of the child's mouth twitched, but he did not answer. Zhu Yao could not be bothered to converse with him, and continued to walk on her own path. In any case, he would not be able to follow her for long. After walking for another 2 hours, Zhu Yao was a demigod stage practitioner. Walking such a short distance was nothing to her, but the child was a mortal, and he had been walking on such a rugged mountain road, so he was already out of breath. However, he still stubbornly followed behind. When he couldn't walk anymore, he would crawl with his hands and feet. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Zhu Yao sighed and finally stopped. She turned to look at the child who was in a sorry state. Go ahead. Why are you following me? The child was stunned. He lowered his head and looked at her with anticipation and guilt. But he didn't know what to say. You can't be thinking of selling me out again, right? Zhu Yao narrowed her eyes. No, of course not. The child shook his hand anxiously. He took a step forward, wanting to explain, but he was afraid that his dirty clothes would stain her snow-white clothes, so he retreated. He now knew that she had sincerely wanted to help him, but the child gritted his teeth, bowed deeply to her, and said word by word, "Sorry." Zhu Yao frowned. The anger she felt earlier had pretty much dissipated as well, and she sighed. She cast a dirt removal spell on him. His clothes, which had already turned black, instantly returned to their original color. The dirt on his body also disappeared in an instant. The child seemed to be shocked by this magical scene. His eyes widened as he looked at his brand new clothes, looking as if he wanted to ask but did not dare to. "I forgive you. Let's return." Zhu Yao sighed. Still a child. The child's face turned pale, and the joy on his face disappeared. She just tightly held onto the hem of her clothes, which were obviously a little too small, and didn't say anything. "What? You're afraid that those people will find trouble with you?" Zhu Yao thought of this possibility. Pulling his hand, she drew a talisman on his palm. A string of white words floated on his palm, and after a flash it disappeared. "I have placed this talisman on your body. Before you turn 20, it will protect you from being bullied by others. They won't be able to touch you. Go." This was a passive wind-type formation. When someone attacked him, it would automatically activate. Zhu Yao waved her hands, turned around, and continued on her own path. Her initial goal was to make the child feel grateful to her. Now that her goal was achieved, and he was no longer a threat in the future, she could leave now. Zhu Yao took a few steps forward, only to realize that not only did the child not leave, he even followed closely behind her. The hell, this unbearable child, he couldn't be relying on her, right? Zhu Yao's initial plan was to let him return on his own, while she followed him in the dark. She would either drop him off in the next town, or simply find a family to adopt him. She could even use an appropriate mystic art to change the memories of his adoptive parents. Without his miserable childhood, he would not fall into the path of the devil. However, this time, as though he had been enlightened, the child knelt on the ground. Deity, please take me in as your disciple. She did not have such plans. After the child said this, he began to continuously kowtow, as though he had the intention of not getting up if she did not agree to it. Zhu Yao instantly felt a little headache. Seeing that he was about to cough up blood, she waved her hand and used a wind-type talisman to lift him up. I already have a disciple. I don't have any plans to take another. The child's face paled, yet he once again knelt down. He still said the same words. Deity, please take me in as your disciple. Enough, enough. Stop kowtowing. How troublesome. Recalling his demonic physique, if she were to really take him in as her disciple, she felt as though a huge wave of trouble was approaching. Having a water spirit vein disciple in her family was already enough of a headache. Now, there was even a demonic physique that was being fought over by heretic practitioners. She felt that her entire body was in a terrible state. Although I can't take you in as my disciple, I can still recommend you into the deity sect. The boy's eyes shone, and they were filled with stars. This time, he was truly grateful from the bottom of his heart. Once again, he solemnly kowtowed 3 times. Thank you, deity. However, the path of cultivation requires one to have a spirit vein. If you do not have a spirit vein when the time comes, even if someone recommends you, you will not be able to cultivate. Although she had long known that he was a tri-spirit vein holder, she still had to remind him. The boy blanked for a moment, and only nodded a moment later. I understand. Thank you, deity. It's nothing much, no need to thank me. Zhu Yao planned to hand him over to Zmo. It was good for him to join Ancient Hill sect as well. After all, he was in her territory, and she could take care of him. You don't have to call me deity. I'm just a practitioner as well, and my name is Zhu Yao. Yes, the boy replied. After pondering for a moment on how he should address her, and recalling that she had been calling herself Big Sister earlier, he said, Big Sis Zhu Yao. Zhu Yao simply felt her heart trembling for a moment, and a strange feeling rose. She felt that this form of address was a little strange, as though she did not really like it coming out of his mouth. It's best if you call me Zhu Yao or Sovereign. Oh, the boy was a little disappointed. Thinking that the deity might still be angry at him, he obediently called out, Sovereign, what's your name? Zhu Yao changed the topic, wanting to shake off that strange feeling. The boy's eyes shone for a moment, as though he was very happy to hear that she was paying attention to him. I'm Wusong. Wusong. It sure was a nice-sounding name. Zhu Yao waved her hand and said, Let's go. This time, she did not intentionally walk. Instead, she took out the sect's standard transportation tool, that piece of leaf. Although she wanted to fly on her sword in the beginning, she was worried that as a mortal, he might not be able to withstand the speed of her flying sword. Hence, she chose this mystic tool which could fly slower. Wu Song was very happy, as he sat on the leaf with a curious look. His little paws touched left and right, yet he was afraid that if he did too much, she would be unhappy. He obediently sat on the leaf, and did not dare to casually move around. That restrained look, Zhu Yao found it a little funny, and casually asked, Oh right, I forgot to ask you. Just how much silver did you sell me for? Wu Song's expression paled, and he looked at her a little anxiously. I'm just casually asking, just tell me directly. She was really curious. Deity cultivation could change one's physique, hence, the higher one's cultivation, the more beautiful one would be. She was, after all, a demigod stage sovereign. No matter what, she could be considered a beauty that could cause the downfall of cities and countries, right? Just thinking about it made her a little excited. No. Wu Song lowered his head and clasped his little hands. Ah. What did he mean? I didn't ask for money. Wu Song honestly replied. Back then I thought the deity, sovereign, wanted to harm me, so I didn't ask for money from her. What the hell, so she gave it to him for free? Can't you be a little cheaper? Zhu Yao was very unhappy. However, when she thought about it carefully, if he had silver on him back then, he wouldn't have gone to the pawn shop, and in the end, he was even chased out of the broken temple by his companions. So, sovereign's face, I've never been able to see it. Wu Song continued to explain. So, I don't know how much I can sell it for. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment, and only then did she recall. Deity practitioners all carried their own spiritual energy, and with that kind of spiritual energy, one's cultivation level could be determined by people with the same or higher cultivation level. The denser the spiritual energy, the higher one's cultivation level. And because mortals did not take in spiritual energy into their bodies, if deity practitioners did not intentionally retract their spiritual energy, they would not be able to see through spiritual energy. Even if they were to see it, they would only have a vague impression in their minds, and would not be able to clearly see what it looked like. So it wasn't that she wasn't worth anything, it was simply because they did not know what was good for them. Alright, she had found back a little of her equilibrium. Zhu Yao concentrated and retracted the spiritual energy around her body, and looked towards the boy. Can you see it clearly now? Wu Song raised his head, and was instantly stunned. His pair of eyes suddenly widened, as though he had seen an inconceivable scene, as he stared straight at her without blinking. Don't be infatuated with Big Sis. Big Sis is just a legend. Zhu Yao suppressed the little smugness in the depths of her heart. She wanted him to recognize her face, so that he wouldn't remember his savior. Zhu Yao once again released her spiritual energy, blurring her own face. Only then did the little boy react. Zhu Yao wanted him to once again give her a sky-high price, when she suddenly felt a strange spiritual energy. They were heretic practitioners, and there were a lot of them. Zhu Yao looked towards the southeast direction. What was happening over there? Why were there so many heretic practitioners gathered? Looking at the terrain over there, the spiritual energy was dense, and it was condensed without dissipating. There should be a spiritual vein underground. A place like this should have been the location of a deity sect. Zhu Yao pondered for a moment, turned around, and flew in that direction, and even increased her speed. Those heretic practitioners seemed to be retreating, as they flew in different directions. Could they have discovered her? That couldn't be. Among those people, there were only a few Azaz stage practitioners, and the one with the highest cultivation level was merely at the nascent soul stage. It was impossible for them to sense her. Chapter 100. Which sect are you people from? Why are you being pursued by heretic practitioners? Zhu Yao asked. The children inside looked at each other in dismay. A moment later, the oldest girl among them, who had the highest cultivation base, stood up. She seemed to have confirmed that Emo Tienga wasn't one of the evil cultivators from before. So she bowed to Emo Tienga like a junior. Thank you for saving us, senior. We are disciples of the Azure Melancholy sect, and I have only been in the sect for 10 years. Today, a large wave of heretic cultivators suddenly attacked the mountain gate. It was Martial Uncle's sect leader, who asked me to bring everyone here to hide. As for the reason, we don't know either. Zhu Yao frowned. It was understandable that the group of children did not know the reason. The heretic practitioners outside are no longer here, but Zhu Yao hesitated for a moment, and still decided to tell them. Other than you two, there are no other survivors. I believe your master has already met with misfortune as well. As soon as she finished speaking, there was a faint sound of crying coming from inside. It's the sect leader's token. Suddenly, a disciple pointed at the jade token in her hand and said in surprise. The others also realized it. Little Radish's eyes, which were filled with sorrow earlier, instantly lit up. Zhu Yao suddenly had a bad premonition. The sect leader's token is in her hands. Then she is, absolutely. Otherwise, how could he have opened the formation outside? Disciple greets sect leader. The eldest child suddenly knelt down in front of her. Her kneeling was like pushing a domino. The group of little radishes knelt down in a row and shouted in unison. Disciple greets sect leader. Fuck, do you have to be so casual? You've misunderstood. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. She was merely a passerby. How did she become the sect master? This jade medallion was given to me by someone from your sect when we were in the rear courtyard just now. He told me to save you, but he didn't give me the position of sect leader. The sect master's token can only be passed on to the next sect master. The child looked at her excitedly. The sect leader has personally given it to you, so you are our new sect leader. The other little radishes nodded in agreement as well. Pairs of sparkling eyes looked at her expectantly. Zhu Yao's words of rejection were instantly blocked. The hell? Were these little radishes really not trying to drag her down with them? All right. We'll talk about this later. She had to think of a skillful way to reject him. She had already spent so much effort on one disciple at home, and now she had to raise an entire sect. Wasn't that courting death? The pile of corpses in front still had to be cleared. Zhu Yao pointed to the few older children to follow her. The others stayed where they were. Zhu Yao had Wuxia stay behind as well, and had him look after these children whose ages were similar to his. Then she brought a few disciples out. As soon as the children came out, they were shocked by all kinds of demonic beasts kneeling on the ground. Some of them were afraid and hid behind them. However, when they saw that the demonic beasts did not attack them, and were instead extremely respectful to them, they became bolder. But when he reached the blood pit in front of him, their faces were still pale with fright, and some of them were even crying and vomiting at the side. Zhu Yao knew that this would happen, so she did not let the younger children come out. After the children had recovered a little, only then did she order them to bring a few demonic beasts, each to collect all the corpses in the sect, and move them to this pit. Although those demonic beasts were ownerless, and their bestial instincts were still there, with her aura suppressing them, they did not dare to harm the children. He obediently followed them around to search for bodies. Sesame was kicked out by her to help out as well, and it took care of those demonic beasts in passing. They split up the work. Their movements were rather fast, and in a moment, all of the corpses were brought over. Zhu Yao cast an art. In an instant, the blood pit was set ablaze. She chanted the rebirth incantation, and within the flames, flashes of light floated towards the sky. The scene was extremely dazzling and shocking, however, under the flames was a deathly silence of sorrow. Zhu Yao sighed and stroked the head of the nearest child. She was burning spiritual fire, and it burned extremely quickly. In a moment, the entire blood pit was only left with a layer of black ash. Zhu Yao then cast an earth-type mystic art, forming a gigantic grave. I don't know your teacher's name, so you guys should carve these tombstones yourselves. The few 15 to 16-year-old children turned to look at her, and nodded in unison. They replied in unison, "Yes, sect master. I already said that I'm not the sect master. These children are really..." Zhu Yao had initially wanted to let these children leave the mountain. After all, they had only just come up the mountain, and they should still have relatives in the mortal realm. Returning home was much better than staying in a deity sect that had lost its protection. However, after asking around, she found out that these children were actually all orphans. Mama's egg, she was completely entangled. Sect master, the teacher's tombstones are done. Sect master, the library pavilion is done. Sect master, the pellet pavilion and sword pavilion are done as well. Sect master, slap your sister's door. Flips table. Zhu Yao spent the entire day on this group of sparkling, energetic little radishes. Why was it that she was able to obtain the position of sect master? By simply going up the mountain to buy soy sauce. And she was even given a basket of little radish heads. Zhu Yao deeply felt that she was going to be defeated by little radish heads in this lifetime. In the past, it was still alright if there was only Yu Yao, and later on, when Wuxia came, she could still endure it. Why was it that there was a huge wave this time? Was this Plants vs. Zombies? A group of little radishes had attacked. Zhu Yao sighed deeply and weakly waved her hands. Bring me to the pellet pavilion first. Yes, Sect Master. Little Radish number 1 replied. And then, he joyfully led the way. The so-called pellet pavilion was naturally a place to store medicinal pellets. Zhu Yao needed to understand how much this sect still had in stock. However, when she arrived there, Zhu Yao's face darkened, and the corner of her lips twitched. Such a small house of a few square meters was actually a pellet pavilion? Stop joking. As expected, a sect like this should be disbanded as soon as possible. When Zhu Yao walked in, she became even more irritated. Although there were many pellets neatly placed inside, they were all commonly used pellets in the cultivation world. There wasn't even a single one of the most common foundation pellets. She only found out after asking. Only after asking did she find out that foundation pellets were extremely precious pellets in their sect, and they were all kept by the sect master himself. She should be glad that there were grain-abstaining pellets the most. At the very least, this group of little radishes did not need to starve, right? Her life was dark. Following that, the sword pavilion felt like crying even more. This was a place to store mystic tools and treasures, and there were quite a lot of them stored inside as well. However, they were all first and second ranked mystic tools, and it was already not bad to be able to fly on a sword, let alone being able to defend against enemies and the like. She suddenly understood why this sect had been destroyed so easily, because they were simply too poor. Zhu Yao sighed deeply, and felt as though she wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Let's go to the book pavilion then. It's fine if they're poor, but it's fine as long as there aren't any problems with their cultivation arts as well. Sect Master, the books in the book pavilion, eldest senior martial brother, and the others have already taken them out to dry. Now, we just have to go to the plaza in the front hall to take a look. Little Radish asked. Eldest senior martial brother? Who was this? Wasn't the biggest one among the little radishes a girl? It's eldest senior martial brother Wusong. Little Radish number 1, with an innocent look replied. Wusong. Wasn't he the male antagonist little wimp she brought along? When did he become your eldest senior martial brother? Speak clearly, hey. Wait, did she just say to dry the books? Weren't the books that recorded cultivation arts all carved onto special jade tablets using spiritual energy? Why did they have to take them out to dry? When she arrived at the front hall, she understood the reason. Because those books on cultivation techniques were really books, the kind that were written in black and white. Of course, she could also guess why they didn't use jade tablets, because they were poor. Just how poor was this sect, hey? However, she had developed Wusong to have some leadership skills, as he unsteadily commanded the dozen or so little radishes to dry the books in the plaza. The division of labor was clear, and it was neither fast nor slow. She also did not know how long a day had passed. Why did he mix so well with this group of little radishes? Everyone faintly felt as though they were following his lead. Of course, it might be related to her as well. However, a child's smile could not lie. Those little radishes trusted him from the bottom of their hearts. Zhu Yao instantly had an idea. Actually, she had always been a little worried that this child would go astray. Initially, she wanted to bring him into Ancient Hill sect. Growing up in a deity sect since young, he would more or less lean towards the righteous path. However, the previous Xiao Yi had grown up in a deity sect as well. In the end, he still went astray when he should go astray. Could it be that he would be the same as that Xiao Yi? The most effective way to stop a person from going astray was none other than to nurture his sense of responsibility, especially someone like him, who had always been rejected by his companions. In the depths of his heart, he longed for the dependence and companionship of others. Then, why not let him continue staying here? As the saying goes, every sect has an eldest senior martial brother who is morally, intellectually, physically, and aesthetically well developed. Wusong. Then, you should properly develop in all aspects here. Sect Master. The busy little radishes stopped, and simultaneously bowed towards him. Sovereign. Wusong called out with a joyful look as well. Amen. Zhu Yao nodded. At that moment, She had the confidence to build a new deity sect. Wasn't it just a little poor? She had the storage ring her master had left behind for her. So it was more than enough for her to raise a sect. She called the few bigger radishes and Wusong over, and prepared to discuss about the future. Firstly, the first matter was to change the sect's name. This group of radishes were too small. If they were to use the previous name, those heretic practitioners might suddenly attack them again. If she was not around, this group of radishes would only have a life of squatting in a pit. On the other hand, if they were to change the name, even if others were to discover it, they would simply think that this was a newly established little deity sect. In any case, a deity mountain like this would never be empty for too long, and it was very common for deity practitioners to occupy it to establish a sect. She had thought that this point would be met with the opposition of the radishes. After all, if they were to change the name, it would no longer be the same sect as before. However, she had evidently underestimated the endurance of the little radishes. Towards her, the new sect master's words, they completely obeyed her unconditionally. Then sect master, what should we call our sect? Little radish number N asked. Amen. Zhu Yao pondered for a moment. There's a need for a resounding name. Why don't we call it Shandong's Azure Flight then? If there was a sect with strong deity cultivation techniques, go look for Shandong's Azure Flight. Was there anything more domineering than this? Ha ha ha, she was truly a genius. But sect master, our deity mountain is in the south. Why do we have to call it Shandong? Little radish number 1 raised his doubts. Oh right, adding a place name seemed a little cowardly. Then let's take the latter 2 words and call it Azure Flight. Zhu Yao made the final decision, and the little radishes cheered in unison. Thus, Azure Flight sect was officially established. Currently, including the sect master, there were a total of 83 people. Chapter 101. Zhu Yao frowned and gave up on chasing. Instead, she landed on the ground and walked towards the source of the stench. Although Wusong was a little confused, he could guess that something had happened. He did not ask, and simply followed closely behind her. Suddenly, as though he had seen something, he called out, "Sovereign!" Wusong pointed to the ground in front of him, where half an arm was stained with blood. Naturally, Zhu Yao had discovered it long ago. However, the place where the arm was severed was very clean, and there was no blood at all. This was not a severed arm. Zhu Yao cast an art, drew out a ray of light, and charged forward. Suddenly, the air shook like the surface of water, and then, like a curtain being lifted, it opened up to the 2 sides. Behind the curtain, however, was another world. A mountain peak was currently floating in the middle of the clouds, as though it was a divine realm. This was a great mountain barrier formation. However, this great mountain barrier formation was a little low-end, as it could only conceal the divine mountain. Compared to ancient hill sect's absolute defense formation, it was simply weak. Zhu Yao silently gave her master a thumbs up. After the formation opened, the place where the arm was severed revealed a person. That person was no longer breathing, and his eyes were bulging, as though he had seen something terrifying. Zhu Yao sent her divine sense over, and realized that the person was actually an Azoth practitioner, though his Azoth core was already shattered. Since this mountain barrier formation was so casual, it must be a second-rate sect. And it seemed like something big had happened. Zhu Yao frowned, summoned her own flying sword, pulled Wusong up, and flew towards the main mountain. Let's go. Wusong was a little frightened, yet he did not make any sound. He knew that something big had happened, and quietly followed Zhu Yao. The closer they got to the mountain peak, the thicker the stench of blood became. It had already reached a suffocating point. Earlier, her divine sense had already swept over here, and she was mentally prepared. However, when she personally saw the scene, she was still stunned. The entire mountain peak was filled with the corpses of deity disciples. Some of them had their chests pierced through, while some of them were directly sliced into 2. On the ground, there were countless severed limbs that belonged to others, scattered all over the place. This scene was simply too cruel. Zhu Yao could only cover Wusong's eyes at the side, as even she could not bear to continue watching. Close your eyes. If I don't, you're not allowed to open them. Wu Song was stunned for a moment, and then silently nodded. Just what kind of grudge did that heretic practitioner have with this second-rate sect, to the point that he wanted to exterminate their entire sect? He carefully examined it. He discovered that there was still a faint aura in the rear hall. She immediately flew over on her sword. However, he was stunned by the even more terrifying scene behind him. It was a pit that had been smashed out temporarily, but there were countless corpses piled up in the pit, and not a single one of them was intact. The blood that flowed out filled the entire pit. This was like a feast of slaughter, and it was so cruel that it made one's hair stand on end. Zhu Yao could not help but feel a surge of anger. Save me. One of them was covered in blood. A person who could no longer be seen crawled out of the bloody pit, but only half of his body remained. Zhu Yao walked over, suppressing the sourness in the depths of her heart. She transferred some spiritual energy to him. How are you? Although she said that, she knew that he could not hold on any longer. Not to mention that he only had half a body left. His golden core had already been shattered, and his cultivation destroyed. It was already a miracle that he could hold on until now, and still have a breath left. Save the children. That person used all his strength to tug on the corner of her clothes. He handed over a jade tablet. Back cave. After saying that, he fell down. He had completely lost all signs of life. Zhu Yao sighed. She looked at the jade tablet that was still dyed with blood in her hands. This should be a mystic artifact, used to open some sort of formation. Earlier he said back cave? Could it be that there were still people alive? She immediately stood up and walked towards the back. After investigating, she realized that there was indeed a cave residence at the back of the mountain. However, the door was tightly shut, and there was a gigantic ceiling formation on it. This was a life origin formation that even a nascent soul practitioner could not break with his full strength. A so-called life origin formation was a formation that could only be set up by someone using their blood as a sacrifice, or using their life to replace the formation. Hence, this formation could not be broken from the outside, nor could it be destroyed from the inside. Furthermore, it could conceal the aura within the formation. Hence, when she sent her divine sense over earlier, there were no signs of anyone here. However, this formation was actually exposed to the outside just like that. Someone must have discovered it, but no one dared to break the formation and enter. Zhu Yao frowned. This formation could not be entered, nor could it be exited. If she did not come today, wouldn't the person inside be trapped to death inside? Zhu Yao took 2 steps forward. Just as she was about to break this formation, she suddenly realized there was another formation's ripple at the side. Zhu Yao inspected it, and realized it was actually a teleportation formation. And it was a forceful teleportation formation? Zhu Yao suddenly had a bad premonition. However, this formation was set up very ingeniously, and it could not be forcefully broken. Furthermore, the condition to activate it was actually when the previous formation had failed. Zhu Yao was a little troubled. However, she had to save the person inside, otherwise, they would be trapped to death inside. Furthermore, the heretic practitioners had annihilated a deity sect on such a large scale, which could be considered as a public challenge to deity practitioners. As the #1 deity sect, Ancient Hill sect could not just sit and watch. She might even be able to find some clues from this formation that was intentionally added. Zhu Yao made her decision. She had Wu Song stand a little further away before she made her move to break the formation. Life origin formations actually had a fatal weakness. This was something she read from the introduction book her master left behind. The life origin formation used the life soul of the person who was sacrificed as the formation core. As long as the life soul was no longer present, the formation would naturally be broken. Hence, what she had to do was very simple. She just had to purge that dead soul. Zhu Yao cast a few hand seals, broke the formation core, and then the Sanskrit voice of rebirth sounded out. A moment later, a soul dressed in blue appeared from the formation core. He was wearing the same school uniform that the dead disciples wore. His initial vicious aura, under Zhu Yao's Sanskrit voice, slowly calmed down, and he returned to the appearance of a youth. "You!" That soul was a little doubtful, as though he had recognized that she was not a heretic practitioner. Ancient hill sect. Zhu Yao simply said these 3 words. Only then did a relieved smile appear on the face of that soul. And then, it slowly dissipated. This was Zhu Yao's first time purging a dead soul, and fortunately she succeeded. Following the disappearance of that dead soul, that formation naturally lost its effect. Zhu Yao took a step back and returned to Wu Song's side. Realizing that he was still obediently closing his eyes, she was finally at ease. Then she stared at the hidden formation. As expected, that formation was activated. It emitted out a huge red light, and it was growing larger. Suddenly, a loud roar resounded through the clouds, and a 6th-ranked demonic beast flew out from within. It looked like a horse, but its 4 hooves were emitting flames, and it had wings on its back. Its head was like that of a leopard, and it had a mouth full of ferocious sharp teeth. So it was just a teleportation formation for demonic beasts. Zhu Yao was a little disappointed. Wu Song, however, was frightened by that roar. His little body trembled, and he took a step closer to her. However, he still firmly remembered her words, and did not open his eyes. Not bad, he's an obedient child. Zhu Yao nodded satisfactorily, and pulled him a little closer into her embrace. After that formation teleported a 6th-ranked demonic beast, it seemed as though it could not stop. One after another, demonic beasts ran out from within, as though it had triggered a beast tide. 6th-ranked, 7th-ranked, and even 8th-ranked demonic beasts. Sesame, roar roar! Sesame immediately jumped out, and looked at the demonic beasts that were scuttling out like fleas with a scornful gaze. It then turned to look at Zhu Yao resentfully. Mistress, my tail isn't healed yet. It had no energy, and did not want to move. Zhu Yao's expression sank. I don't mind letting you come a few more times, uncle. Don't. Sesame immediately became obedient. It did not know what uncle was, but it remembered the pain from back then. It was afraid of pain. With a swing of its tail, it slapped away a 7th-ranked demonic beast, and said with a fawning tone, Mistress, actually these demonic beasts are just too weak, so they can't recognize you. As long as you release your aura, they will immediately listen to you. What did it mean? Zhu Yao did not understand, but she felt that there were hints in its words. Hence, she sent a voice transmission over. Sesame immediately sent a voice transmission over. Mistress, have you forgotten? You're a dragon. As long as you release your dragon's might, they will immediately become obedient. Zhu Yao suspiciously glanced at it. Closing her eyes, she instantly released her aura. This was not pressure, but she could faintly feel the aura that had always existed in her dantian being released. As expected, not even a moment later, the demonic beasts that were still ferocious earlier suddenly stopped. All of them looked at her while trembling. She did not know which one of them started it, but one after another, they crawled towards her, looking as though they were truly obedient. The hell, it's so effective. Did she manage to draw such an incredible body this time? Mistress, Sesame came over with a small trembling voice. It turned into a size that did not even reach her waist, and rubbed against her leg with an intoxicated look. Mistress, you're so mighty. Sesame wants to be your little beastie for the rest of your life. So please don't hold back and ravage me. That look, where was the majesty of a 10th-ranked demonic beast? Scram! Zhu Yao kicked it away, and walked towards the cave residence earlier. Why was this Sesame getting more and more shameless? Mistress, Sesame followed after her reluctantly, and looked at her thighs with teary eyes. It really wanted to hug it. It had no choice either. The dragon race had an innate deterrence towards demonic beasts. That was an inheritance that was carved into its bones, and it could not help but want to get closer to them. Chapter 102. Wu Song, come here. Zhu Yao beckoned to Wu Song, and he obediently walked over. Zhu Yao continued to wear her cold and aloof mask and sternly said, From now on, you two are the first batch of disciples of my Azure Flight, and Wu Song is your eldest senior martial brother. Little Radish's face was a little joyful, as if they had expected it. They called out in unison, Eldest senior martial brother. Venerable one. Wu Song looked up at her hesitantly. Zhu Yao continued, Most probably, I don't have much time to take care of you guys. In the future, Azure Flight Sect will be handed over to you. You don't have to take good care of junior martial brothers and sisters. Do you understand? Wu Song clenched his fists. After a while, he nodded heavily and said, "Yes, Sect Master." Amen. Zhu Yao nodded satisfactorily. It seemed like his sense of responsibility was slowly growing, which was a good sign. Zhu Yao had the rest of the little radishes leave, leaving only Wu Song behind. Then, she took out the crystal root used to test spirit veins that she found in the sword pavilion earlier, and signaled him to press on it. 3 colors of gold, red, and yellow appeared on the ball. It was indeed the metal, fire, and earth spirit roots he had seen in his dream. Wu Song looked at her in confusion. You have the metal, fire, and earth triple spiritual roots. Although it's not great, it's not bad either. Zhu Yao explained. You're currently the eldest senior martial brother of the sect, so naturally, you have to cultivate as well. I don't expect you to have great achievements in your cultivation. However, you have to ensure that those children are well taken care of and manage Azure Flight Sect well. Can you do that? Wu Song thought for a while and nodded heavily. Only then did Zhu Yao take out an empty jade tablet. Holding it in her palm, she engraved a few metal, fire, and earth mystic arts into it, and passed it to him. He told him that after he learned how to draw qi into his body, he could practice the method inside. At the same time, he also engraved some of the refining methods that his master had left behind. His spirit root was most suitable for refining weapons. As long as he worked hard, he might be able to become a master refiner. Then, he explained in detail how to draw the qi into his body. Following the method that her master had taught her, she circulated the spiritual energy in his body once before letting him comprehend it on his own. Wu Song comprehended it very quickly. Early the next morning, she discovered that he had already entered the first level of Qi disciple. Perhaps it was because of the sense of responsibility she had placed on him that he was very diligent in his cultivation. Zhu Yao spent exactly half a month's time before she managed to sort out all the miscellaneous matters in Azure Flight Sect and restored the sect's normal operations as much as she could. Furthermore, she had Little Radish perform their respective duties. They wouldn't starve to death. She engraved all the cultivation methods on the wet books onto the jade tablet. She also modified some of the contents and added some notes that were easy to understand. There was nothing wrong with the general cultivation method. She arranged for the demonic beasts that were sent over by the teleportation array to the foot of the mountain. They were sent to guard the entrances of the mountain guarding formation. Even though these demonic beasts had not been tamed into spiritual beasts, they did not dare to disobey her orders. In fact, they were even a little excited. Sure enough, the identity of the dragon clan was useful. Naturally, Zhu Yao had modified the mountain barrier formation. It was no longer a concealment formation, but one that truly possessed a defensive function. At the very least, after the formation was activated, there would not be any mountain entry tablets. Cultivators below the soul formation stage were unable to enter. After finishing everything, Zhu Yao once again took out some of the mystic tools her master left behind. She selected and removed 2 5th-ranked mystic tools. The rest were all 8th-ranked and above mystic tools. They were basically unusable if they were not at the nascent soul stage. As expected, there was nothing she could do even if she had too many treasures. Hence, she could only try her best to engrave some weapon refinement methods or formations. However, there were fewer books regarding talismans and taming beasts. As for pellets, sorry, her master had never liked to use pellets and had never taught her before. Hence this area was empty. Fortunately, the sect had some simple pellet refinement methods in the first place. For example, the grain abstention pellet. At the very least, the little radishes would not starve to death. Zhu Yao spent exactly 3 months before she was able to settle the matter properly. Even without her, no one else could easily touch this place. Wu Song had reached the 3rd level of essence as well. The first sect rule she set was that before she built her foundation, she was not allowed to leave the mountain. Hence, Zhu Yao left Sesame and a communication talisman behind and hurried back to Jade Forest Mountain. Though Sesame was unwilling to accompany a bunch of little turnips, and through all sorts of coquettishly begging to be brought away, it was still ruthlessly rejected by her. Other than having it guide the turnips in their cultivation, she still had to rely on its pressure as a 10th-ranked demonic beast to intimidate those low-ranked demonic beasts guarding the mountain, to prevent any incidents from happening while she was away. It would not be good if she invited trouble into the sect. "Master, how is it?" Yu Luo retracted her casting hand and looked at Zhu Yao with an excited expression. Her master had left for half a year, and her realm had already stabilized 3 months ago. Seeing that she had yet to return, she trained in ice-type mystic arts for another 3 months, and now, her casting speed was already not any weaker than someone with an ice spirit vein. Zhu Yao nodded. She was worried about another matter. "Little turnip, you're turning 15 next month, right?" "Yes." Yu Luo was a little curious. Her master actually remembered her birthday. Actually, to practitioners, time was no longer an important noun, especially for days like birthdays that happened every year. There wasn't much meaning to it, and if her master did not mention it, she would have almost forgotten about it herself. "There's only 5 years left," Zhu Yao muttered. 5 years later, it would be the day her body was taken over in her dreams. "Next, I will teach you sword techniques. You must have some accomplishments within 5 years, and it would be best if you can comprehend sword intent." Sword intent? Yu Luo was stunned for a moment. Isn't that something that can only be comprehended after one forms his Azoth core? There are no absolutes in this world. Who said that? Didn't Xiaoyi comprehend it when he was at Foundation as well? Though he had a cheat. "Why are you in such a hurry?" Yu Luo kept feeling that her master seemed to be rushing for time. Back then, she wanted her to immediately build her foundation, and this time, she was talking about sword intent. Were all Jade Forest Mountain disciples this demanding? Zhu Yao glanced at her and sternly said, "I want you to participate in the Intersect tournament 5 years later, and you must obtain first place in the Foundation realm." Yu Luo suddenly widened her eyes. First place? She had just built her foundation, and it was uncertain if she could even reach the middle stages in 5 years. Furthermore, most of the participants were Foundation paragons. "Master, you just have to tell me, all right? Or not?" Yu Luo gritted her teeth. The Intersect tournament was a martial arts competition for the entire deity sect. If she could obtain first place, she could indeed become famous in a single battle. Because she had tested her spirit vein when she was young, everyone knew that there was a water spirit vein furnace in Ancient Hill sect, and she had always been taken in as a demigod sovereign's disciple. If she could obtain first place with her water spirit vein, at the very least, no one would dare to look down on her again. She took a deep breath. As though she had made up her mind, she heavily nodded. All right. Zhu Yao nodded. She was really afraid that she would have to hide in Jade Forest Mountain for the rest of her life, not daring to leave. If that was the case, she would never be able to grow. "From tomorrow onwards, I will teach you sword arts. You have to learn diligently." "Yes, master." In terms of sword arts, although Zhu Yao used a sword as well, compared to her master, she was just trash. However, her master had never taught her any proper moves or sword arts, and had simply sparred with her. Actually, her master's method was very simple. True knowledge comes from practice. Only by truly fighting would one know what kind of sword arts were the most suitable. Actually, sword arts did not have any specific moves. Hence, the method she taught Little Radish was only a single one, and that was to directly beat her. Seeing her being beaten down by her time and time again, and then crawling back up to seek a beating, Zhu Yao was still a little happy. As expected, being a master is still the best. Little Radish was a good child with 5 stresses and 4 beauties. Though it was also related to the way she was raised since young. With her current personality, she dared to guarantee that she would definitely not go astray. In these 5 years, Zhu Yao spent her time happily beating up her disciple. As for the excavator, Apui, regarding the matter regarding Azure Flight sect, when she returned, she had already told ZMO about the matter regarding the extermination of the sect. Naturally, She did not mention the matter regarding those lucky little radishes. Zemo's expression was very ugly. Most probably, he was guessing the reason why the heretic practitioner suddenly exterminated a not-so-famous second-rate deity sect. As for the matters after, Zhu Yao did not continue to bother about them either. After all, this involved the entire deity sect, so it was better for the sect master to worry about it. Wu Song would often contact her as well, to inform her about the big and small matters within Azure Flight sect. Speaking of which, she had to thank ZMO. Back then, he had forcefully stuffed a large amount of matters regarding the sect to her, allowing her to understand quite a few matters regarding the sect's operations. He was also able to manage Azure Flight with ease. It was just that among the 82 radishes, the aptitude for cultivation was not very good. Most of them had 4 spiritual roots, and the majority of them had 5 spiritual roots. There were very few disciples like Wu Song who possessed tri-spiritual roots, not to mention duo spiritual roots and heavenly spiritual roots. This was extremely detrimental to the growth of the sect, because no matter how hard they cultivated, it was estimated that only a few would be able to reach the nascent soul stage. However, Zhu Yao did not think so. In the modern era, the strength of a group did not depend on a single person or a few people. It was all about teamwork. Since I can't beat him in a duel, I'll just have to gang up on him. Gang up on him. There were benefits to having more spirit roots. At the very least, this kind of cooperation was very good. Zhu Yao had Wu Song pay more attention to his disciples' strong points, and then he would groom them accordingly. Waterwood focused on healing. Those who were proficient in Waterwood spells could act as backline healers. Fire Gold specialized in offense and specialized in fire and metal element spells. He could be the main attacker. The Earth element focused on defense. Those who were proficient in Earth magic could focus on defense. She could let everyone form small groups and work together frequently. Just like the teamwork battles in games, there would be tanks, healers, and DPS. Would they still be afraid of not being able to defeat the boss? Even if she did not allow them to descend the mountain on their own, there were so many demonic beasts on the mountain. It would be fine to randomly pull 1 or 2 of them to spar with and practice their teamwork. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.